In a recent op-ed column, he said, and I quote, "Success in creating artificial intelligence would be the biggest event in human history. Unfortunately, it might also be the last." Are you saying that robots are going to destroy humanity?
Resistance is futile.
You have 20 seconds to comply.
There's a story that scientists built an intelligent computer. The first question they asked it was, "Is there a God?" The computer replied, "There is now," and a bolt of lightning struck the plug, so it couldn't be turned off.
Holy shit, that's the most terrifying story I've ever heard.
Yes.
Digital frontier to reshape the human condition.
Replicants are like any other machine. They're either a benefit or a hazard.
Thus did man become the architect of his own demise.
Try to create a suit of armor around the world. Artificial intelligence.
You're all going to die down here.
Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. You are a plague. We are the cure.
To protect humanity, some humans must be sacrificed.
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
It can't be bargained with, it can't be reasoned with, and it absolutely will not stop.
What's up? Welcome one and all to Reality Decoded live this Friday, the 28th of May 2021. And Martha, ATN, Trip and Mrs. L are watching along. It's saying we've got 6 in the audience right now. Hopefully you can hear me okay. And hopefully you guys enjoyed that robot-themed intro for this evening's stream, which is part 1 of Robots Rising, a series of streams I have planned, concentrating obviously around robots, because it is the 100th anniversary of the first time robots was mentioned in society, and it was 100 years ago that robot was first mentioned in a piece of fiction, and that is what we are going to be looking at in part 1 is retro robots. We are going back to where it all began, because you need to understand sometimes where you are going. We need to understand where we have come from, and some of you watching may or may not remember that this was an ill-fated stream from about 3 weeks ago. That's somewhere in the middle of that presentation. For some unbetold reason, excuse me there, it was shut down in its prime, although at the time I think we only had actually 3 people watching, so maybe it was a blessing in disguise, putting a lame dog out of its misery, so to speak. But it is a reattempt to restream that presentation, and mainly because I kind of missed my self-imposed deadline today for my intended content for this evening's stream. So that is on hold for now, and will be a feature presentation, All Out Apocalypse Part 2. Lots of stuff been going on since the last All Out Apocalypse stream that we put up on Reality Decoded. Now, I am going to try something a little bit different this evening from previous streams, and dive straight in to that presentation. And as I said, some of you may have remembered this from about 2, or was it 3 weeks ago? I can't remember now. Time does fly when you're not having fun. But as I said, you may remember some of this content. It was about 30 minutes into that presentation that it was sort of shut down, and then unfortunately, Martha, you were the only person that seemed to make it back when I did get the stream up and running, only to find that the microphone had been disabled, and that has been a reoccurring issue here at Reality Decoded with regards to the algorithm, community standards, and the team that watches over us to make sure we are safe and not talking about things that we shouldn't be. Seeing a lot of illegals lately having to lock everything up. Okay, well, are they robbing and raping and pillaging like Vikings down there in Texas, or is it just an influx? But nevertheless, as I was saying, Martha, you were the only one that sort of tuned in, and it was a bit of an ongoing occurrence, and repeat offense by the algorithm, and it was the second time in particular that when we were talking about robots that the good old Google safety team stepped in and shut the stream down. So if or not that is coincidental or on purpose, who knows, but it does sort of put you a little bit out of your stride, and it sort of put me into a why am I even bother type mode, when sort of everything seems to be against you. You just want to sort of shut the doors and close yourself inside. But as I said, we are going to dive pretty much straight in to the stream this evening. Robots Rising, Retro Robots, or rather the feature presentation, and then we'll sort of recap and get together and have a chat afterwards. If or not you will stick around that long, we will remain to be seen. If or not some gussets and other regular offenders find us in between now and then, let's keep our fingers crossed. So if you are all sitting comfortably and are all situated, ready to go, we are gonna momentarily turn off the microphone and start this evening's feature presentation. So welcome one and all to the latest live stream from Reality Decoded, which, if you do not know by now, or if maybe you are late to the proceedings, or perhaps for those who the penny have still not dropped yet, is titled Robots Rising, which is most likely to be part 1 of an ongoing series of streams titled Robots Rising, where we will be taking a retrospective and somewhat nostalgic trip through the realms of fictional robots over the decades and try to decode some of the programmatics hidden within those popular works of fiction in order to gain a greater perspective of where exactly humanity is being led in terms of the acceptance of robotics, which now are we going to see mild-mannered, helpful butler-type droids in the sort of shape and form of maybe C-3PO and R2-D2, or are we going to see some more sinister, tyrannical, terminating, transforming types of robots that may or may not be an exoskeleton covered with synthetic skin that is indistinguishable from humans? That is yet to be seen, and what we are in terms hoping to decode through these series of presentations. But one thing for sure, the future will contain robots, and the sad thing is that our present contains probably more robots than we possibly realize. And there are, believe it or not, robots in disguise in and amongst us every day, in plain sight, that go unnoticed to humanity. So what part and parcel robots are playing, and just how much of a part and parcel robotics and artificial intelligence is playing in the controlling and manipulation of society, of the human nature in the 21st century, is something that was very much predictive and contained within many varieties of robotic fictions that we are, as I said, going to take a very retrospective and nostalgic look at in order to understand our own reality. And our fiction has always prepared us for our reality and has always contained more programmatics than just the predictive nature. Social, behavioral, and cultural programmatics are contained within fiction. And there is a reason it is called television programming. But nonetheless, guys, sit back, relax, and enjoy, because Reality's Decoded Robots Rising feature presentation is about to begin.
Danger, Will Robinson! Danger!
With no more further ado, let us start out the proceedings with Robots Rising by looking at this article that was originally posted back in 2011 on pastemagazine.com, and it was published by an individual by the name of Josh Jackson, JJ. And bear in mind, this was written 10 years ago in January of 2011, and there's a picture of Wall-E from the Disney Pixar movie. But the time of writing this article, the word robot was celebrating its 90th anniversary of first appearing in a Carol Capek play called R.U. And they decided what better way to toast the machines than with a list of their favorite robots, past, present, future, real, fictional, and of course Daft Punk. So I'm guessing these guys are a little bit on the geek-minded side of things as to why they compiled this list. But as I did mention, this was 10 years ago, so now robotics has been with us for over a century. And I figured what a better place to start than refamiliarizing ourselves with some of the more popular robots. And we are going to cherry pick a few of these to look further and deeper in, and we're not going to read each and every one of the 40 most popular robots, but it just goes to show that, as I've already mentioned, we've not lived in an age with that has been free of robotic programmatics, and as I said, when you sort of see, you realize how much we have been saturated by robots from a very, very early age in what is the messaging and the purposes of all this, and the fact that we are in an age where, you know, many of the things of science science fiction of yesteryear is now sort of science reality, and some of that is actually sort of a little bit dated technology. And once upon a time back in the 1980s, when I was geeking it up to VHS in movies in what was sort of the silver age of cinema, there was a lot of robotic movies doing the rounds on the movie screens and in VHS rental shops, and one of which was a Blade Runner, which we will be looking deeper into, which took place in 2018, which is now in our past. But back then when we looked at it, it seemed so very, very far away. And part of the purpose of this presentation is also to sort of just demonstrate how we have surpassed some of the realms of futuristic fiction, and it is part of our everyday reality. But anyway, as I said, it is 100 years since the word robot was first mentioned and used in a piece of fiction or entertainment, whatever you choose. And the writers have come up with a list of 40 of the more popular robots in their opinion, but they have excluded cyborgs. They set themselves some rules that were once humans, and in brackets they say sorry 7 of 9 and RoboCop, and they've also tried to only use one example from each fictional universe. However, they cheated with Star Wars, and as I said, when you're sort of making up the rules, you can make up the rules to fit your own desire, and that goes with anything really and truly, from governments to geeks that write articles for the internet. But nevertheless, if you have a suggestion or not on the list, or a nitpick with the definition of robots, please do so in the comments section. And you who are watching me present to you this list of 40 robots, if you have any suggestions or any additional input to some of the ones that we are going to look at, please feel free to do so in the comment section if you are watching in retrospect, or in live chat if you are indeed watching live. So it starts out at number 40 with the Da Vinci surgical system, and I believe this is a real life robot. It was created in 2000, and it was created by the Intuitive Surgical Company Corporation Institute, whatever they are. While the Da Vinci isn't performing the operations, this kind of robotic technology has had a huge advancement for surgical procedures, allowing doctors to control its 4 robotic arms remotely. So it acts robotically, but it still needs human interaction. Moving along, here's one of the popular 80s robots that you probably didn't even realize was a robot, and something that we actually kind of do have nowadays: talking cars. KITT, Knight Rider, the Knight Industries 2000 pimped up Trans Am, although not as cool as the Bandits Trans Am. It was a updated version of the Trans Am, and as I just stated, it stood for the Knight Industries 2000, a very private and secretive organization, clandestine organization that staged the death of a cop and give him a brand new identity and an all functioning, all singing, all dancing, turbo boosting, computerized Pontiac Trans Am. And of course it was played, Michael Knight was played by David Hasselhoff, and one of the more popular fictional entertainment sci-fi series of the decade. I'm pretty sure you will all agree that Knight Rider what was one of those shows that, as a teenager or a youngster, you would tune in to watch whenever it was airing. And I loved Knight Rider, and to this day the soundtrack and the intro is still as timeless as it ever was. And I'm probably going to edit in a Knight Rider intro ringtone right now to try and protect myself from copyright strikes. Ringtones are a wonderful way to provide soundtracks for streams. Moving on, the Tachyomas from Ghost in the Shell, an interesting anime series and manga comic books from Japan. It's actually award-winning and very, very highly acclaimed. I'm not going to look too much into them because many of you may be a little unpopular with Ghost in the Shell, but I can't remember if it is Glynis or Laurie that has a daughter that's very, very into anime. So if it is you, Glynis or Laurie, sorry if I've couldn't remember which one it was, but I do remember one of you does have a daughter that is into anime, so there's a good chance you might have a little bit of familiarity with Ghost in the Shell, and we will probably be taking a little bit of a deeper look into them later on, and you can read that for yourself if you want to. Toyota Violin Playing Robot was created in 2007, and it was a mechanical musician that had a violin recital at the Shanghai World Expo in the year of 2010, but Toyota is developing the line as a personal assistance or partner robots. Partner robots, I'm guessing, could be sex robots. We will be looking at sex robots for you weird and wonderful types that were wondering if or not we would be covering that in this series of Robots Rising streams. And the answer to that is yes. Yes, we will. Not sure who Gertie Moon is. It was from 2009, and it was voiced by Kevin Spacey. I'm guessing this was in a movie. But there is an introduction. 2009, the sort of age where sort of smartphones, little robotic devices of their own, were starting to gain popularity, and there may be a little bit of promatics for what was to become emojis, and back then they called them emoji cons, as it said there back in 2011. Now they're just commonly known as emojis. 35 they think is Mega Man from the video game series, and he predated saving to keep advancing through Dr. Wally's nefarious plots. You had to leave your console on and play from the last checkpoint in a day before memory cards and such forth. And here's a familiar one from back in the 60s, and I can imagine Martha and Nancy. I could see you two playing some Rock'em Sock'em robots back in the day with a malted shake, listening to the Beatles and the Monkees, getting your Tavistock-y and inspired groove on. But they were created in 1964 and were a fun game that were popularized for decades afterwards. And here is another very popular robot that you probably didn't realize was a robot. You probably thought he was just a cuddly comic-y character from Japan, Doraemon, and he is a robot that is sent from the future to help improve the lives of man's ancestors. Doraemon becomes the companion of Nobita-kun, who is a boy who has become accustomed to nothing but misery, and Doraemon uses his fourth dimensional pocket to produce gadgets, tools, and medicines from the future. And the day the Earth stood still also brought a robotic messenger that said if Earth doesn't get its shit together and disarm its nuclear arsenals, and they were, because they would be in danger of destroying themselves, he was going to destroy them. Not exactly the most peaceful of harbingers or messengers. If you don't sort your shit out from destroying yourself, I'll destroy you for you. But anyway, Doraemon has a whole bunch of fourth dimensional gadgets he can pull from a pocket, and he is sent from the future to help and aid humanity. Moving on. Ultimo from South Park, cardboard box character. I can't remember which one of the it was Cartman, as it said there, but I couldn't remember exactly which one of the characters that played him. And he was the master of pitching Adam Sandler vehicles to film studio execs until he is, of course, captured by the military, and a typical South Park episode, and there are an awful lot of military and defense agencies that are developing and researching into robots, but there was a fictional robot from South Park. I can't actually remember those episodes, to be honest. I haven't watched all of the South Park series, but they are very, very programmatic and hidden with not so subtle messaging. This is a robot from the Star Wars universe. but not the Star Wars universe. Many will be familiar from it is from the role-playing game Knights of the Old Republic. And the Knights of the Old Republic kind of are stories, sort of a medieval Star Wars stories, I guess, and take place thousands of years before the events of the movies. But he was a bounty hunter, and there's quite a few bounty hunter droids and assassin droids within the realms of Star Wars. Let me know now, guys, if you want to do a Star Wars droid special through this. It would also give me maybe some incentive to create a special Star Wars droid intro of some sorts. But let's move on to the next page, depending on how quickly. Wonderful transition there. Sometimes it does get a little bit delayed. Now, the 30, the ED-209 from Robocop. Very familiar and cool, badass robot that you are seeing there. And this version of Robot has been depicted in things like South Park once again. Also the Simpsons have featured him, Family Guy, and this is a very popular robot that was his catchphrase was,
"You have 20 seconds to comply."
And it didn't matter, even though in the test drill that they were promoting and displaying this robot for the first time, it didn't matter that the test subject complied. He still got gunned down, whether or not that was a defunction or a default protocol that had been implanted into the ED-2009. And he was modeled after an American sports cars and has mounted machine guns for arms. The growl in his voice was created by playing a Jaguar's growl backwards. Just watch out for his old glitch. ED-209, we comply, we comply. And that's what I'm saying. Was it a glitch, or was the glitch purposely implanted into the software of the ED-209? And, you know, imagine sort of, hey, in real life, one of these tech giant corporations that developed a similar robot to the ED-209 distributed them to a law enforcement agency who, due to sort of pandemic conditions, can no longer patrol, and for the safety and social distancing purposes, they deploy real life Robocops. And trust me, guys, we are going to be looking at Robocop because one of the more interesting pieces of fiction that has come to be very, very real. But imagine, as I said, that they did plan this glitch that was a designed glitch similar to Order 66 in Star Wars. That would do an awful lot to help with some sort of crowd dispersal, or thus depopulation. Before, oh my goodness, we didn't know that there was a glitch in the software, and when we carried out our testing in the factory, everything was perfect and hunky-dory. It was only when it was in the field that unforeseen circumstances that we couldn't simulate within the lab environment rendered the glitch to become active. Not a lie if they believe it, but you can see the scenario that I am trying to present to you there, that was depicted in Robocop from 1987. The beer fetching robot. I'm pretty sure quite a few of you guys out there watching would love a beer, or maybe a bong fetching robot. Once upon a time, I'd have loved a bong fetching and loading robot, but my bong days are long ago now. I do enjoy my marijuana, but in the form of a spliff. Spliff forming robot might also be an advantageous addition to the household, wouldn't you think? But let's move on. Bishop from Aliens, he was a cool as fuck alien that was programmed to never harm humans and always to protect him, and come to a very, very untimely demise. But Aliens, that was a sort of futuristic world again that had one of these sort of corporate dictatorship, militarized industrial complex corporation who sent their sort of somebody, an overseer, up with a crack team of space military commandos and Ripley, who had experienced the aliens and survived them before, to go and try and find a way how they could possibly weaponize or profit from the aliens. And they also sent up Bishop along, I forgot his name then, along with that exploration reconnaissance mission to help and aid with the human personnel on that that ill-fated trip. But you know, a little while ago we did put up a stream, all out apocalypse, zombies, aliens, UFOs, asteroids, you name it. Are we choosing our own reality? And the fact that you know, we are surrounded by robots, this is a very realistic you know, threat or non-threat. You know, they might be a wonderful help to society, or again, possibly not, as the way things do tend to pan out in real life, from the realms of predictive programming from fiction. But anyway, the executive officer at the Sulco of the Sulco is an android that even Ripley comes to love, and he secures a spot on our list of on the list of 40 top robots for rescuing Ripley, and of course the lovable little Newt, who's an old lady now. She's a cute little kid back in then. I'll say she's not an old lady, but she's certainly over 40. Seen her best years, let's say that. But the atmospheric processing station explodes, only to be ripped in half by the Queen alien. You know, imagine aliens and robots battling it out. You know, oh my goodness, there's an inbound alien invasion. It's time to roll out our robot army that we've been building in Area 52 in preparation and readiness for this exact eventuality. Imagine that for a reality. Very, very possible. The Energizer Bunny makes number 25 on this list. He came out in 1988. He put batteries in him and he kept drumming. Not sure it's really a robot, as opposed to a remote control toy, but I guess very, very basic robotics were within his technology that made him beat his drum. The Halper robot from Venture Brothers, don't know anything about that, never really watched Venture Brothers. Clank, Ratchet and Clank from, I believe, the movie Robots. Or is it from a game? I'm not sure. There was a movie, Robots, that had similar looking characters to this. Daft Punk, 1993. These robots twins have been making us humans dance since their hit debut Homework. And most recently, they wrote an entire movie soundtrack, which some would say was the best part of the entire film. Keep up the good work, twins, from Sean Doyle. And they didn't put a picture of there, but I think it was the All Around the World. And there was a couple of guys dressed as robots doing robotic body popping. Johnny Five, Short Circuit. He's another lovable robot that we will be looking a little bit deeper in through the course of this presentation and series of streams on Robots Rising. He came out in 1986, and he was a military grade killer bot before he sort of becomes sentient, run away, and wanted to be alive. But as I said, we're looking a lot more at Johnny Five in the future. I know Baby P, Becky Pamplin, our beloved and trusted wench wrench, and the adjudicator, the burp count adjudicator that watches, loves Lost in Space, and one of my most lovable robots was Robot from Lost in Space, and there he is.
Danger, Will Robinson! Danger!
Danger. He was lovely, and he was cool as fuck, and one of the sort of robots, as I said, as a child, that I was introduced or introduced me to robots. But really and truly, it was those two droids from Star Wars. But Danger, Will Robinson. The Robinsons couldn't even bother naming the Class M3 Model B9 General Utility Non-Theorizing Environmental Control Robot, even though he could play the guitar. He was designed by Robert Kinoshita, who also designed one of the first atmospheric machines in film, Robbie the Robot from Forbidden Planet. And another one of my favorite two robots from back in the day were Robbie the Robot and the robot from Lost in Space. Some robot from Kilroy was here. Marvin the paranoid android from The Hitchhiker's Guide in the galaxy. And Bender wasn't the first robot to struggle with depression. Bender, of course, from Futurama. I didn't ask to be made. No one consulted me or considered my feelings in the matter, is what Marvin used to quote, I believe. But there is another popular robot that we won't spend too much time on, or the one that is from Lego. But moving on, Robbie from iRobot, not Robbie from Forbidden Planet, written by Isaac Asimov in 1939, and he certainly played an awful lot in the popularization and programmatics of robots to society. And some of you who have seen the Will Smith iRobot movie may not realize that it did originate from a 1930s short story from the Mac Daddy author of robotics, Isaac Asimov, who also went on to write the 3 Laws of Robotics, which we did look at during the Terminator Decoded series. But he saves the life of a little girl who thinks of him as her best friend. And he did, and as it said, Asimov did anything to shape the way we think about human-robot interaction, and how much longer is it going to be before children grow up with robotic friends instead of real children friends. Moving on. We're almost done. Astro Boy, another popular robot character to come out of Japan, was created in 1952 by Osamu Tezuka, who is a Mac Daddy of manga. And he was recently rebooted in sort of a, I don't know if it was a live action or sort of CGI animated TV movie series rather. But he was popular back in the 1960s and did air on US TV. But the boy, Astro Boy, was a robot replacement for the fictional Dr. Tenema, who had a son who died, and he replaced him with a robot boy, and that was something also that was in Steven Spielberg's AI, which was kind of a retelling of Pinocchio with a robotic puppet. But the robot in AI was a replacement child. How long is it going to be before robotic replacement children are going to be available? Or maybe you sort of grow up with a child that may have sort of some disabilities or handicaps and is sort of going to have a difficult, hard time in life. Or don't worry, you can just upload his memories into a computer, and then we'll plug a chip into this robot that looks just like him, and he won't be crippled anymore or have cancer, whatever the case may be. But the Iron Giant was another popular cartoon that come out at the dawn of the 21st century. But here, let's come on. The great, the fantastic, the heroic Optimus Prime. Autobots transform and roll out. And he is one of my fictional heroes. Who doesn't love a little bit of Optimus Prime? And if or not we can get away with some gratuitous Generation 1 animated Transformers imagery or not in this series remains to be seen. But Transformers will probably be either a standalone, completely different topic, or we might just cover them as part, give them a standalone episode during Robots Rising. Let me know if you want to see a singular one-off Robot Rising Transformers special stream, because we could spend a lot of time decoding them, but we can condense it if you like. I do aware that some of my streams do get a little bit long-winded and gratuitously so, maybe from my personal point of view or perspective preferences. But the Roomba makes it to 27, the vacuum cleaning robot that wandered around your house, also featured in Breaking Bad. I think that somehow made it a little bit popular also. Don't know if or not you had a robot, but there is a very, very early example of robotic helpers, household helpers, similar to what we kind of saw in the Jetsons. DJ Roomba is from Parks and Recreations. Kind of a fun show, I guess. I've watched a few, but not all of them to know exactly what it is. Child, was it Cindy Mayweather, Metropolis, the Arc Android albums. Now we are going to be looking at a movie, Metropolis, after this article, because that is the first ever movie to feature a robot in. Oh my goodness, what a movie that is in terms of programmatics. So much to look at there. That could also be a solitary standalone, but we're trying to sort of give you some cliff notes, for want of a better description, in this presentation on Metropolis, because that is kind of where it really did all start with cinematically. So move on. 14, Rosie from the Jetsons, who we just mentioned, was from 1962, and of course Hanna and Barbera brought us the Jetsons, as they did also the Flintstones. But the Jetsons lived a very, very futuristic lifestyle with flying cars and sort of houses that seemed to float in the atmosphere rather than being situated on a terra firma. If or not that is due to pollution or viruses and pandemics and such forth. Well, if you just go and live above the atmosphere, then we won't catch any of these diseases or breathe in unfresh air. But Crow T robot from Mystery Science. Oh, Crow T, yeah, the Mystery Science theater robots that you kind of see the silhouettes of when they are watching and decoding or mocking or satirical commentating on B movies. K9 from Doctor Who. Don't know if many of you are fans of Doctor Who. I do know our dear friend Annie Bedell over at Prepper Chicks. She's a huge Whovian, and that is a fan of Doctor Who, for those of you who don't know. But he's created in 1977, the same year Star Wars come out, and he was a dog, a robotic dog, and we have robotic dogs now patrolling the streets of metropolistic cities such as New York and Toronto, I believe. There was one seen in Ontario. I can't remember if it was Toronto or Ottawa, but there you go, Doctor Who 1977. As I said, the year Star Wars also come out and introduced us to two of the probably most lovable robots stroke droids in the world. But the Daleks were flesh and blood on the inside and just used the sort of Dalek suit as an exoskeleton for destructive and dominance purposes. But the Cybermen and the Cybermen were as well part men. Sort of cyborgs, I guess, but we'd have to pick the good Doctor robotic dogs. Anyway, even though we had no idea, Mark III got his own spin-off in 1981. Which was a show called K9 and Company. Sorry if I butchered reading that. I don't know why I'm getting a bit squinty, but number 11, I thought he would have been much higher up the list than number 11. What do you think, guys? Should the Terminator be higher up the list than 11 in popular robots? I would probably put him in the top 3, thinking about it, in my personal list, but nevertheless. He is ranked number 11 in the particular authors of this one, and the Governor was completely in his element during the first 2 great incarnations of the Terminator. It did kind of sort of fall a little bit apart after the second movie, Judgment Day. And I'm sure as it sort of progressed, the sort of space-time continuum got so messed up, I don't think they really knew what they were writing in the realms of the Terminator fiction. And some of you may or may not be aware of this, but the realms of or the fictional world and the realms of the Terminator and RoboCop exist in the universe. We might look a little bit at that, although not in the cinema universe. It does exist within the same comic book universe, and there's actually a whole series of comics, RoboCop versus Terminator. The top 10 guys. So I mentioned a little while ago a movie, Metropolis, and the Maschinenmensch, which from the German, which I'm sure I butchered. I'm not very good at German pronunciations. Means machine man, and it was also known as Maria, also known as False Maria, and this was created in 1927 in the first ever movie to depict a robot, and she would go on to inspire C-3PO, who was modeled very much on Maria from Metropolis, as well as Blade Runner and Ghost in the Shell. And oh my goodness, the programmatics in that movie that also depict a new world order and a hierarchy of elites and an underworld of poor, deprived deprived slaves, for want of a better word, that pull all the handles and levers to the great machine that that provides the profits for the industrialists that live in an all singing, all dancing smart city that was depicted in 1927. And as I said, we're going to be looking at that next. But a machine man made in the image of a beautiful school teacher and the robot of Fritz Lang's monumental film. It was produced in German, and Adolf Hitler was a huge fan of the movie, as was his buddy Goebbels and fellow henchman in the National Socialist Party. But it also became an icon for a dystopic vision of the future, which in the Germany of 1927 might not have been pessimistic enough. But Asimov, we did have a little glimpse at him during the Terminator Decoded series, and he is created by Honda, who make cars, and just like Toyota, who are making a helper or partner robot that can play a violin. Honda are no different, moving out of automotive industry and into robotic industry. And they weren't kidding when they named the astronaut-looking creation Advanced Step in Innovative Mobility, pronounced Ashimo. This is the robot we all wanted as a kid. And was this a programmatics, and was he sort of based very much on Rosie? Doesn't look too dissimilar from Rosie from the Jetsons. And as I said, pretty much as a 10, 11-year-old boy, if I'd have had an Ashimo, you've got to put the Japanese accent on it there, Ashimo, to pronounce it correctly. But yeah, as I said, tell me if you wouldn't have killed or bit your left hand off in order to have had a robot friend named Ashimo that you could have hung out with. GLaDOS from Portal, something I'm not familiar with, so let's just quickly, I think it's a video game. HAL 900, again from the movie 2001. And the authors debated whether HAL belonged on this list. He's a computer program with artificial intelligence, but his only physical representation is a camera eye. Through though he does not control the Discovery, he was one of the inaugural inductees into the Robot Hall of Fame. So his artificial intelligence, robotic, it's a robotic mind or a robotic entity. How can you really describe artificial intelligence if it doesn't have sort of a body within which it resides in? And not all robotic bodies look as cool as some of the robots from fiction like Terminator or Robbie or Lost in Space, or from Westworld. The final 5 from Battlestar Galactica are 6 on the list, and this does indeed show how much geeky, nerdy individuals they are to put these in ahead of the Terminator. But how to pick a Cylon, Antenna, or Boomer, Lubber? But yeah, they love Battlestar Galactica. But they are going to go with the final 5. Well, you know who. The Cylon's relationship with humanity grows more complex as disagreement arises within their ranks, and the BSG skin jobs were so real and nuanced that they even didn't know that they were robots. So I'm gonna go really out on a limb there, because I don't know anything what they're talking about there, although I am very familiar with Battlestar Galactica. And I'm guessing, I don't know if that is from the reboot or the original, but let's move on. The Mars rover, Sojourner, created in 1996 as another Mars rover. He looks a little bit similar to Wall-E, and again, was Wall-E sort of depicted and created and influenced from this rover that's supposed to be on Mars. It isn't on Mars. It's out in Laurel Canyon, where the CIA own an awful lot of land in huge studios and bunkers and such forth, where they can create and fabricate what is then fiction that is then passed off as real life events. And if or not you believe that there are rovers roving around under their own artificial intelligence directive on the planet Mars is up to you, but I certainly don't think so. But it was developed by the Mars Pathfinder on Independence Day in 1997. In 1997, the movie Independence Day also come out. But the 23-pound Sojourner I don't know if I'm reading that right, studied the Martian surface and atmosphere, and a relative bargain at only $150 million. And its name was chosen by a 12-year-old boy from Connecticut, honoring abolitionist and feminist. What 12-year-old boy even knows what those fucking words even? I don't even know what some of them mean, although I kind of do. But I'm making lighthearted in satire of the fact that I'm pretty sure a fucking 12-year-old boy from Connecticut didn't come up with that name. That was probably the name that the scientists give it in themselves, and just pretended a 12-year-old boy come up with that idea. Because I'm pretty sure if I was a 12-year-old boy, I'd have given it a much cooler name like Marsbot or Rovertron 2006. I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Something fucking better than a representation of feminist and abolitionist. There you go. It's too many T's for me, guys. I do struggle with T's. Number 4, data from Star Trek. Again, this is just showing how geeky and nerdy these writers are. No offense, I'm geeky and nerdy, just wasn't that into Star Trek. Sort of Star Trek was for the sort of geeky geeks, where the cooler geeks like Star Wars. Share if you agree, the cool geeks like Star Wars and the geeky geeks like Star Trek. But the sentient android who wanted to be human, this Pinocchio couldn't tell a lie, however, or a joke. Data was the best character from the best Star Trek series, again showing their geek side there and their geek opinions. And Spinner was brilliant at giving life to his alter egos. 3, R2-D2 from Star Wars, and there was a guy inside of him, Kenny Baker, but like Charlie Brown's teacher, we never knew what the little guy was saying, but you didn't have to speak R2 to know he had an attitude. And despite 3PO's protestations, there were no delusions of grandeur. Luke Skywalker's astromech droid made a habit of saving the galaxy. Now, many people don't actually realize this or are unaware that the whole Star Wars saga, and I'm not even gonna begin to include the Disney sack of monkey spunk and dog shit that they passed off as Star Wars as part of the Star Wars saga, but the original saga was not about the Skywalker genealogy. It was actually told from the droids' perspective, and it was their adventures and interactions with the Skywalkers that was the perspective and point of view from the storytelling. But anyway, they put Bender above R2-D2, the bending robot from Futurama. And Bender is cool. I do like Bender, and he was a Mexican Bade hencher in Mexico. And he is a sociopath of steel, iron, titanium, lead, zinc, dolomite, and nickel, who has kidnapped Jay Leno's head and sent his own son to robot hell. But he really just wants to be a folk singer. And Wally, they put Wally is the number 1 robot. Yeah, I wouldn't have even put Wally in the top 10, to be quite honest with you, but their top 10 was very, very questionable. But as I think they are compiling it on their own personal preferences, and nothing wrong with that. We don't have to agree, but ambitious, daring, incredible, a work of art, Pixar's loftiest film yet, had to be all of those things and more, and it happens to be a near perfect movie, especially in its near silent first half. It's deceptively straightforward tale of 2 robots in love, and it is shrewdly diminished in an environmentally friendly story, which rather scathing critique of American consumerism and decadence. The pure sense of wonder and level and artistry in Wall-E continues to be nothing short of astonishing, and that was written by somebody called Jeremy Medina. And if or not, Pixar and Disney paid them to put that, because it was a very pretentious depiction of what they consider is the number one robot of all time. And I would probably put the best robots of all time as 3PO and R2-D2, the Terminator, at number 2. And maybe my own personal choice would be Kelly LeBrock from Weird Science, which we will be looking at as we do explore sex robots. But not just yet. We are going to go and have a little look at the Maschinen from Metropolis. Again, excuse my terrible abomination of German pronunciation there, and that is what we are gonna go and look at quickly next as Robots Rising continues.
They've got to tell people.
Tell them what?
The oceans die, planktons die. It's people. Soylent Green made out of people.
They're making our food. Next thing they'll be breeding us with cattle. The food. You better tell them. You better tell them.
We are now going to look a little bit at Metropolis, a movie that came out in 1927, and it was a movie that was way ahead of its time, both visually and conceptually, and although it came out almost 100 years ago, it is sort of almost ever much as relevant as it is in today's standards as when it came out, and it is an extremely deep and complex movie full of social commentary, symbolism, and predictions of what would be to come. And it came out at the sort of the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, at a time where the globalists were beginning to sort of spread their wings of globalism and capitalism, and through their decadence like to brag their wealth by constructing very large skyscrapers. And in Metropolis we see a dystopian future where the world is split in two between the very wealthy industrialists that live in the Metropolis city above ground, whereas the have-nots who toil and trouble in the lower levels of society and work on the essential machine that was the city that the industrialists lived in. They were essentially slaves to the industrialists, pretty much as any employee is in this day and age. But not only was it so very ahead of its time, it also pretty much revolutionized and branded and created the way science fiction was shaped from there on out. Without Metropolis, we certainly would have not had C-3PO, and the precursor to Blade Runner is contained within Metropolis, as is that of Terminator. So not only was it kind of the first movie that did introduce us and visually bring us what a robot would look like to the screen, it was the first real serious sci-fi movie to come out. It does have a very complex and deep plot to it, which we will try to sort of brief down for you. It takes place, as I say, in a dystopian future, and the sort of head of the industrialists has created a brand new Tower of Babel, and the industrialists live in the illuminated city of lights above ground. And part of his celebration is to sort of launch the first ever robot to the public as part of the ceremony of the opening of his new Tower of Robot. And the intended recipient to be housed within the robot was his dead wife, as he wanted to not only roll out his next wave of industrial machinery, the robots that would save the industrialists money in labor, but also offer the prospect of immortality for the new world that he was building. But through a complex series of love triangles in Love Childs, it turns out that the intended recipient to be housed within Maria the robot was changed, and a revolutionary individual from the lower levels of society named Maria, who was prophesizing that somebody would come to lead the workers up in an uprising against the industrialists in order to gain solidarity, was replaced and put into the robot, where she was then programmed to lead the revolution not only to victory but to its ultimate doom. It is an interesting movie. You can watch it on YouTube, but the concept of transferring a dead loved one into a robot is something that we have seen in science fiction ever since then, multiple times, and the concept of a sort of an exoskeleton within a synthetically skin and flesh and blood on the outside, similar to the Terminator. And as I said, without this movie and its introduction of robotics, the world of sci-fi would have been extremely different. You can kind of see there the transformation scene in the pyramids of static of Maria as the human living Maria is transferred into the robotic version that is then a tool and a puppet of the industrialists. But without Metropolis, there would be no science fiction. Without Metropolis, there would be none of the more popular robots that we have come to love over the years. So, as I said, you can't really start Robots Rising without going back to the origins, but we are going to take a look at some more retro robots as Robots Rising continues very shortly. We are about to look at some more retro robots, but before we start out doing so, we are going to finish up looking a little bit further more at Metropolis. And as you can see, the article we are about to dive into does contain imagery of Maria from Metropolis, the Manchinan Manch, as she was known. Now, although Metropolis was a groundbreaking, revolutionary, ahead of its time movie that is filled with subliminal messaging, social commentary, groundbreaking special effects, and not only did it bring us the first ever cinematic depiction and visualization of a robot, it also provided the backdrop for the pathway for many other science fiction movies to follow, the dystopian future of very tall high-rise buildings that stand 1,000 stories tall. Now, we don't actually have skyscrapers yet that stand 1,000 stories tall. We do have skyscrapers, however, plentiful around the globe that do stand over 1,000 feet tall, and some of these globalist industrial types also have the technology and devices at their means and availability to reduce some of those skyscrapers into dust before our eyes. But before we digress and start talking about a certain Tuesday morning in September of 2001, let's get back to Metropolis. Now, although as we said, it was very popular, groundbreaking and revolutionary, it wasn't, however, very popular at all, and it wasn't until sort of way after the film that it was sort of given its acclaim. And although it was a very long silent movie in its home of Germany, where it was originated from and first released, it was 2 hours and 20 something minutes long, and incidentally enough, it's also Adolf Hitler and his buddy Goebbels' favorite movie, but it was very edited when it was sent to the United States for its release, and it was further edited because on release it was considered that it contained a little too much communist propaganda and symbology and messaging. As I said, hidden messaging and deep with programmatics, and again way ahead of its time. But it was sort of butchered very much by the censors and the cinematic board in North America to the point that it wasn't really recognizable lovable from the original concept of the movie, and furthermore the robot wasn't exactly very popularized and made into toys as she was in later life. And I believe it or believe it not, recently, I think it is 2014, I believe, although I may be wrong, a German company actually built a real life Maria, all singing, all dancing, although maybe not as advanced as Maria was depicted in the movie. It still is an actual working replica of that robot that was first visualized back in 1927. But as I said, it wasn't a very, very popular movie, and it didn't reach large audiences in North America, and in particular, it didn't reach young audiences in North America. And we are about to familiarize ourselves a little bit more with some fictional robots, and we are going to have to fast forward a little bit in time to the 1950s before we started to see them really hitting the screens of the movies, the drive-ins, and in its infancy TV stations. We're going to fast track over the 30s and 40s that introduced us to Isaac Asimov, who was sort of the Mac Daddy of robotics, and he certainly played his part in the popularization and the programmatic of robotics, not just in fiction, but in reality. He also wrote The Three Laws of Robotics, which real-life robot industrialists in this day and age are actually working in guidance to as some of the protocols. But we are going to fast forward in time to the 1950s, which was a period that saw us, an increase in popularity with science fiction movies at the movie theaters, and sort of science fiction on TV screens. And it was from Metropolis that these pieces of fiction were very much fueled. And as I said, we are going to kind of fast track some of this very, very long article and look at some of the more popular and lovable robots. And we're going to start out with Robbie the Robot from Forbidden Planet. And this was the dawn, 1950s was the dawn of the popularization of robots that would go on to the normalization of robots, and they had to sort of make them popular, and in particular to kids. And although the robot Maria from Metropolis was sort of much more advanced and in accordance to sort of droids that we may see in fictions like Star Wars back in the 50s, although we were provided with a variety of robots in all shapes and sizes, they all kind of had a little bit of a uniform boxy kind of look, like old refrigerators, and maybe this indeed was part of that programming to make them look as though they were household appliances. To help normalize them, is like, oh no, they're nothing to worry about, they're just like pieces of furniture. But it was Robbie the Robot from Forbidden Planet we are going to look at now. I'm sorry, I did fast forward a little bit too far then, just to try and give you some more visuals rather than just scrolling down the article we are about to read. And Robbie the Robot would be sort of the next big robot on the scene, and one of the more lovable robots of all time. We are going to look at another one of those lovable robots from fiction very shortly that come out in around the same time, that is not too distant or dissimilar rather to Robbie the Robot, who was created by MGM, and it was a lavish and colourful movie titled Forbidden Planet that also starred Leslie Nielsen of Naked Gun fame, but it was the first celebrity robot, and that was the thing. Maria wasn't very popular and wasn't a sort of celebrity until way after the film had been released, unlike Robbie the Robot that also went off to sort of spawn his own merchandise, lunchboxes, toys, pajamas, all sorts of stuff had Robbie the Robot on, as he became the first celebrity robot of many to follow. And the legendary classic movie, The Robot Named Robbie the Robot, played by or voiced by, he was played by Frank Dario and voiced by Marvin Miller. And he was in, that was his first appearance in a film, and also going to have like sort of cameos in other films and sci-fi TV shows as well as sort of late night entertainment. But he was designed by Robert Kinoshita. And there are a lot of Japanese and Asian influences in all of these robots. But Robbie had a cone-shaped clear dome and jukebox-like heads with twirling lights and rotating motorized antenna ears. He had a lighted chest panel that also Darth Vader went on to have. In let's not forget that he was more machine than man, folks. He was a cyborg. But he also had gripping hands. This is Robbie, not Darth Vader, and with a thumb and 2 fingers. He had bulbous segmented legs and a pot belly stove shaped body, and they were very sort of art deco, and they were very, very 50s, and there's a lot of popular sort of robot toys come out in the 50s. They're very, very quiche and collectible, and they're pretty cool, and this was a thing, that they needed something to popularize robots to program in to children, and children wanted to tune in and watch these TV shows to get a glimpse of their favorite robots, and then they could then go and put their Robbie the Robot pajamas on, play with their robot, Robbie the Robot toy, and go off to bed and dream of robots, and maybe go on to become engineers in their future life. But Robbie was language fluent. He could speak English and 187 other languages, as can the robotic device you may be watching this stream on can. In today's society, so translation was one of his big pluses in futuristic features of a robot that come out in the 1950s. And as I said, nowadays we can carry around a device in our hands that probably can speak more than 187 other language, and he had also knew various dialects in subtongues. Robbie was also domesticated as a butler. He could chauffeur, he could cook, he could clean, and he could perform heavy lifting tasks that humans couldn't manage. And again, we have real life, they're not as cool looking as Robbie the Robot, but we do have robots that can lift heavy things, as we saw in Terminator Decoded, which is again did contain a little bit about Isaac Asimov, why we sort of fast-tracked and skipped over him, but we will come back to Isaac before this series of Robot Rising streams is done. Luckily enough, Robbie was incapable of harming anyone, although possessing superhuman strength. He couldn't hurt a human, and this was sort of the first rule of Isaac Asimov's laws of robotics, that robots should not be programmed to harm humans. He short-circuited when he was commanded to shoot Commander Adams, played by Leslie Nielsen, by his owner, Dr. Morbius. And although Robbie was constantly portrayed as a threatening presence in the film's poster, he was non-threatening as you could be. He is one of the more lovable and friendly robots from fiction. But the film told the story of a journey by astronauts of the United Planets cruiser C-57D to a distant planet named Alta 4, where Alta 4, there's an interesting title for a planet there, where they investigated the fate of a colony that was planted on that planet 20 years prior, that nobody had heard of ever since. Again, this is way sort of ahead of its time in the 1950s. We didn't even have a space race back then, and the fact to send humans to other planets for colonies is again one of those sort of fueling ingredients for science fiction that followed. But the studio-bound film inspired the look of many feature films, as did Metropolis, and Robbie would also inspire the way a lot of robots would look that followed on from him during the 1950s. And we are going to be sort of doing a little bit of a decades retrospect, looking at some fictional robots in the fiction decoded part of this, before we kind of do blend in a little bit of reality and head towards more contemporary times. You need to understand, in order to understand where we're going, we need to sort of understand where we came from. but the studio-bound film shaped the way many of the films looked, and notably TV's Star Trek and Star Wars followed and copied a lot of the influence from Forbidden Planet. It was shot in CinemaScope and in color, and reworked Shakespeare's The Tempest into the storyline, and has been psychoanalyzed as a dramatization of repressed sexual desires. So we won't read too much about the film itself. We are kind of looking more at the robot. Robbie was reprised in various cameos and appearances, as I said previously, such as his appearance as the suspected murderer in the TV series The Thin Man in 1958, and also in The Gale Storm Show in 1958, and a whole host of other movies, including Rob Sterling's TV series The Twilight Zone, and he was also the prototype robot, the prototype for Robot B9 in the TV show Lost in Space. So he was the prototype, I believe. Lost in Space and the robot Robbie were from the same factory, and we are going to look at the robot from Lost in Space very, very shortly, because again, there is probably fewer, more popular robots than the robot from Lost in Space, although there are 1 and 2, maybe more that are a little bit more popular and beloved than him. But at his time, there was no more beloved robots than Robbie and the robot from Lost in Space. And again, each and every week, people used to tune in for their dose of climatic Swiss Family Robinson retelling in space with that charming and lovable robot that was just called the Robot. But he went on, as I said, to be in a whole bunch of other films, and he's been at a whole bunch of sci-fi conventions and stuff like that. And he even appeared in Mork in Mindy as Chuck the Robot. But there is, as I said, some images of Robbie the Robot from Forbidden Planet. Fucking great movie, one of my favorites, actually, in just, that sort of pulp 50s sci-fi imagery and posters and stuff. I love all that, as well as the sort of 50s toy robots. And I, as a kid, I had toy robots, and I'm pretty sure maybe some of the boys that are watching had toy robots as some of the girls. I do know that Becky Pamplin does love Lost in Space. So we're not going to read each and every one of these robots, but you can kind of see some of the familiarized shapes and sizes of robots that were thrown at us throughout the 50s and 60s. And there is a Mogwera, who is the mole, a Japanese, come out of the same sort of factory as Godzilla, a robotic monster that became a protector. The Aztec mummy against the humanoid robot also come out in 1958. So there was a saturation of robot and sort of alien UFO movies, and many of these aliens and UFOs brought robots with them, as was the case in The Day the Earth Stood Still. But The Colossus of New York was another movie, Invasion of the Neptune Men, and many of these robots did feature in sort of the drive-through B movies of the era, but they are certainly not without their quiche and cheesy charm. I don't know if you agree with that, but I could watch those sort of black and white movies forever and ever, and I actually do have a whole stack of them on DVD, believe it or not, still. But this sorry, I was going to read this low budget, talkative yet literate minimalist film from director Wesley E. Barry was reputedly Andy Warhol's favorite film, although that bit of trivia was decisively known. What were we talking about? Which film? The Creation of the Humanoids. So all these movies that sort of come out in and around the 50s did contain a lot of robotics within the the realms of sci-fi, be it from outer space, or be they from evil scientists, and sort of maybe retelling of Frankenstein. But there's pages and pages and pages of this. There's Astro Boy, we've also mentioned before. Now, the creator and artist of Astro Boy, also Osamu Tezuka, his name. I was trying to find where it was there because I couldn't remember it. He also modernized Metropolis in the manga form in the 60s also, which is a wonderful, wonderful artistic rendition of that movie, and sort of changed a little bit for the times. And it was also remade into an anime cartoon movie in 2001. It was also kind of a reboot stroke retelling of Metropolis that was slightly modernized and as a sublime piece of cinematic animation. You can actually watch that in its entirety on YouTube also. But Astro Boy again was another one of the sort of more quirkier and cuter robots to come out of that era, and has also been rebooted into a movie as recently as last year, I believe. So forgive me if this article was sort of lost a little bit of its momentum in direction. I do apologize there. This is the other one I wanted to come down and show you before we move on and look at the robot from Lost in Space, was Jason and the Argonauts. It came out in 1963. Now, Jason and the Argonauts borrows deeply from Greek mythology. You know, all the Greek gods and titans. Hercules was involved in it, and it was a very, borrowed from Greek mythology. In fact, it was directly from mythology, but it actually depicted a ancient robot. And the giant, as you can remember, or if we can scroll down, there he is. This individual, if you can remember, it was terrifying. And I do also love Ray Harryhausen movies, who was the puppeteer, stop motion expert who created many of these creatures from the creature features of the time. But as a kid, Jason and the Argonauts, the skeletons in particular, this giant ancient robot, shit the life out of me. And if you remember, they defeated this robot by opening a vent on his heel, like Achilles. I think it actually was a robotic statue of Achilles, but ancient robotics. And we will be looking at a little bit of the real life history of robotics in a retrospect before this episode or this stream. There is part 1 of Robots Rising that is turning into be retro robots. I do sometimes, as you know, make this shit up as I go along. When I sort of started out with intentions for Robot Rising, it was going to be a single stream, but the amount of stuff I wanted to put into that stream sort of was far too much. So rather than spread a rather lot thinly into one stream, I figured, you know what, why don't we spread out over a series of streams on Robots Rising. Hopefully you guys will find those enjoyable. Maybe you might even like to contribute to some of those future streams. But we are going to be moving on and look at another familiar robot from the realms of retrospective fiction, in the form of the robot from Lost in Space. So without any further ado, guys, let's jump out of this article on robots in film and go and check out our familiar friendly robot from Lost in Space, and trusty companion to the Robinson family, as Robots Rising continues.
Danger, Will Robinson! Danger!
So, you have returned, Mr. Robinson.
I didn't want to. I told him what had happened and he forced me to come back.
Forced you?
I owe no loyalty to these Earth people. They are not of my own kind. We are alike. We must work together.
Join the others, Mr. Robinson.
Will, what are you trying to do?
I can't tell you now, but just hope it works.
Although you are superior, we are both machines. I ask only to serve you.
Your proposal is very interesting, but come no closer. I have computed you, and your memory banks do not scan.
We shall be friends. I will prove myself.
Stop where you are. This is a warning. For the last time, stop.
There is no reason for alarm. As as you have said. I am only a primitive, obsolete machine.
I will destroy you.
Can't see a thing. I don't see our robot.
He's probably on the ground.
No, he isn't. I see him.
You have destroyed me.
He did it! I knew he could.
Now, Will, was that your idea?
The robot thought it up.
And I thought the Robotoid was superior. Come on.
The plan was successful.
You mean your plan?
I am only the end result of those who programmed me.
Well, that may be true. But there's something more, too. Something that doesn't make sense. You're more than a machine.
You're our friend.
My computers are deeply affected.
We'd like you to come back to us.
I have returned.
Identify yourself.
Robot Model B9, designed and computerized as a mechanized electronic aid for Earth voyagers engaged in astral expeditions.
What are you?
I am a robot of the class M3, programmed to provide information and support to all Jupiter personnel.
We are all corrosive resistant and self-oiled.
I know my dad told you to watch me, but can't you close your eyes even for a minute?
It does not compute.
2 steps forward, my mechanical friend.
These alien creatures may be very terrifying. You mustn't panic, you know. And don't tremble.
I'm not. You are.
Warning! Alien approaching! Warning! Biophysical experiments extremely dangerous to Earth people!
Okay, guys, we are once again at fandom.com, where we are at the Lost in Space wiki page, and hopefully you guys did enjoy that little nostalgic reminiscent of Robbie the Robot and the beloved robot from Lost in Space, known simply as Robot or occasionally as B9. Unfortunately, it's on the best of pictures of him there. You've got to kind of scroll down to see him in all his glory. But what you did also witness was one of the first on-screen battles that saw Robot versus Robot, and Robbie the Robot was sort of trying to sign up the robot to stand against humans, but the beloved robot from Lost in Space managed to outwit his evil robotic counterpart, and that was sort of part of the 50s and 60s robot normalization and popularization of robots, is the majority of them were friendly and helpful. So the robot from Lost in Space was a B9 class M3 general utility non-theorizing environmental control robot, and he is a character in the original 65 series Lost in Space that many of us would have watched growing up, and I know there's one of 2 of us that love this show immensely, and that's why there may have been a little dedication thrown in there for one of those particular viewers we know so well. But the robot from who doesn't love the robot from Lost in Space? He is up there among the most lovable in coolest of all robots. I think he certainly would be in my top 10. I'm pretty sure he'd be in some of yours top 10, but he is part and parcel of the first wave of real sort of superstar celebrity robots. He'd go on and sort of be in cameos and other TV shows and stuff, but we are going to look at some of his sort of utilities, and although they be of a fictional purpose, some of the things that the robot in Lost in Space possessed that was very, very futuristic is now sort of things that we have at our disposal rather, in the palm of our hand, and also some of the other sort of attributes that he had is very much a real robotic. He was also, as we said, known as B9, benign, there for you guys. And as I said, he was the faithful companion to the Robinsons. It was a retelling of the Swiss Family Robinson, a fantastic story of preparedness and survivalism there for you, but it was a retelling of the Swiss Family Robinson set in a futuristic 1997, again in our past, and since then there has been sort of explorations in space allegedly that have taken robots with them. But although he was a machine endowed with superhuman strength and futuristic weaponry, the robot often displayed human characteristics. He laughed, he joked, he got sad, and he also mocked the other members of the Jupiter 2. And he also managed to be all singing and played the guitar for the entertainment of not only himself, but the Robinsons, and of course, the evil, maniacal, but sort of good-hearted Dr. Smith. He was played by Bob May in a prop costume and built by Bob Stewart, voiced by Dick Tuffield. I did say Dick, and he was designed by Robert Kinoshita, who also designed the Forbidden Planet's Robbie robot, who we saw in confrontation in with the robot from Lost in Space, and certainly a far cry from the robot versus robot SFX we see in modern day sci-fi, but nonetheless even more somehow charming and enjoyable in my opinion. But as I said, War of the Robots was in episode 20 of the series Lost in Space, and did, as I said, depict one of the first more robot versus robot battles that would go on to be quite a popular theme in sci-fi over the decades. But Robot B9 consisted from top down of a glass bubble sensor unit with a moving antenna. Kind of had GPS in him. We have GPS in our phones. We don't need a bubble or an antenna for that. It's all wireless. He had a ring collar that was transluted and fluted, and he also had a cylindrical rotating trunk section with kind of sort of ventilation tubing for arms in claws, and that was about is sort of far advanced as he got. Sorry, my eyes are getting a little bit squeaky as I was trying to read this, so my apologies for getting sidetracked. But we're not going to look too much more at him. As I say, he is a fictional robot. And it goes on more to sort of tell about his exploits, but some of his utilities and things that he had. He was able to lift heavy weights. He did have superhuman strength. He could sort of also communicate in other languages, provide direction, guidance, companionship, and as I said, he did display, although he didn't look very human, he did display some human characteristics. And as I said, we couldn't really sort of look at Robots Rising without some of the key players in the instrumental part of popularizing robotics that you and I have never lived in an age without. So we are going to sort of step out of fiction and look a little bit at the reality side of things, and look what was going on in the real life of robotics during that time. And when you sort of realize that we were born in an age after robotics had been introduced to society, it will sort of make you wonder and think, and possibly consider the way you view robots in modern day society, and you know, have the works of fiction prepared us not only to accept robotics into the household and part of human society, but are they also sort of programming us for where robotics will eventually lead us? The singularity, transhumanism, cyborgism, is that not too far away, or is it in fact already here, just like some of the utilities and functions that the robots back in the 1950s and 60s had, that seemed so very, very futuristic to us at the time. In modern times, these technologies are a thing of the past. They've been around for quite some time now. But anyway, guys, stay tuned. Robots Rising, what is part one of an ongoing series titled Retro Robots, continues right now.
Danger, Will Robinson! Danger!
Having hopefully enjoyed that little retrospective, nostalgic reminder of robots of yesterday, yesterday doesn't matter. All our troubles seem so far away, or did they really? But sorry, I got a little bit sidetracked there. But hopefully, as I said, you enjoyed that little reminder of some of the robots that were all too familiar to us as children, as we now move into the reality side of this evening's presentation, and the realization and the dawn of the thoughts that, wait a minute, all of a sudden those robots that we grew up with as children, that we always sort of were led to believe were so very, very futuristic, have in fact been around since the days before some of us, most of us, were born. And robotics goes back an awful lot longer than we may realize. And as I said, we were always led to believe these were the things of the realms of futuristic, dystopian or science fiction realities. But a brief history of robotics since 1950. It's not exactly that brief, guys, but as I said, sort of decoding fiction, decoding reality. We put the two together so we can gain a greater understanding. And as you guys know by now, fiction does prepare us one way or another to accept realities that are on their way. Not only that, they kind of get us used to normalizing of the ideas of things to come. They get us used to behaving in ways that we're desired to behave in. Lots of programmatics in fiction is why we decode it to understand our reality here at Reality Decoded. But it starts out by saying the term robot comes from a Czechoslovakian word used for work, and it was featured in the 1921 play 100 years ago by Karel Čapek called RUR, which stands for Rossum's Universal Robots. Now, this was the play that would be adapted into Metropolis. And as I said, it is 2021 now. So in the year 1921, before all of us were born, the word robot was already being used, and Hollywood, not Hollywood, but movies and the entertainment industry had first of all put out a play, and secondly had put out a movie way ahead of its time in many ways, shapes and forms. We've already seen that, but Rossum's Universal Robots was the first time that we heard the word robot, and it was used to describe an army of manufactured industrial slaves. Now, it was also at that time that the actual sort of industrial revolution was taking place, that in sort of Metropolis showed us sort of the end result of a longevity of industrialization, what the high-rise buildings in sort of these industrialists playing godlike deities here on planet Earth. But the manufactured industrial slaves are in fact you and I. We have been programmed in behavioral patterns, in belief systems, in such forth, and we've been done so in order to sort of turn the cogs and mechanisms of industry for those industrialist dictators that pull the strings of society and lead us to the direction that they are desiring us to be led on. We are all on the same farm. We are all livestock, and for a better reference, we are all pretty much human robotics that have yet to been introduced to the actual technology and transhumanism that will make us actually drones. But we are in the process of being programmed even more so into mindless living robots. But that is why, again, we sort of have to sort of we look at the machines in science fiction and kind of think, oh, wouldn't it be great to have these helpers, and we don't really realize that that's exactly the sort of part that the majority of us are are playing. We are pretty much robotic helpers to the elites in helping the cogs of industry turn, just as the underworld in Metropolis was depicted in the high wealthy illuminated live in wealth and luxury, while the rest of us toil and trouble in squalor and hardship. But since that first conception back in 1921, we have come to think of robots as the mechanical men or as androids of modern science fiction. However, in reality, technical manuscripts from as early as 300 to 400 BC reveal that human beings have been trying to build automated machines or automata for centuries. Remember Jason and the Argonauts, and even people like Leonardo da Vinci and Galileo, I believe, were sort of trying to use sort of steam and such forth to build some kind of robotic devices during the Renaissance. And, you know, has this technology been around for fucking lot longer than we think, and has it been repressed from us by a certain selected few of futuristic industrialists, perhaps, with the capacity and capability to navigate time and dimension? But nevertheless, this is Robots Rose in Retro Robots. We are looking at the retrospect of real life robotics that many of us may not have realized. And as I said, it's been around before we were born, and we were under the illusion and delusion that it was the realms of future, when in actual fact we'd never lived without it in our lifetimes. But the development of robotics in the modern sense was precipitated by the advent of steam power and electricity during the Industrial Revolution, and a growing market for consumer products drove engineers to devise ways of producing automatic machines to speed up production. Pink Floyd, Welcome to Machines, do tasks for us and do tasks that humans could not do, just like the robots in Lost in Space and Forbidden Planet, and also eventually to replace humans in dangerous situations or in tedious labor where they don't need to take lunch breaks, tea breaks, or even end the shift. But in 1893, and again back to the 19th century, Canadian professor George Moore produced a Steam Man, a prototype for a humanoid robot made of steel and powered by a 0.5 horsepower steam engine. Essentially, it was a gas boiler housed in what looked like a mechanical suit of armor. However, it could walk independently at a rate of 9 miles per hour, 14.5 kilometers an hour, and he could pull light loads. In 1898, good old Nikola Tesla demonstrated a model for a remotely operated submersible boat at Madison Square Garden. Tesla also wrote that he believed it is possible to someday build an intelligent, autonomous humanoid robot. Tesla's ideas were not taken seriously until well the 20th century, and in fact the robotics industry as we know it emerged only around the mid-20th century, once research and development teams began to work in earnest. However, robots were integrated into manufacturing and globally adapted to the military, aeronautics, and space, medical, and entertainment industries. Entertainment industries is very interesting there. But, you know, there is some sort of speculation, talks, theories, rumors, conspiracies, whatever you want to label it, that, you know, sort of maybe during the 1950s, Roswell, there was some kind of an advanced race that visited Earth, either from outer space or from another realm and dimension, maybe from even our future, and the result of that sort of led to some reverse engineering and led certain sort of agencies and governments to have technology that was advanced. or had that advancement already been around, and were they experimenting with sort of findings that they found? Who knows? We can only speculate and theorize. But it was, in the 50s that the dawn of sort of popularized sci-fi movies and robots and aliens in particular were making the rounds on the drive-in screens. But it was also at that time that UFO sightings also started to become more and widely frequently happening and reported. But the sort of science fiction movie and the science fiction industry in real life kind of becoming science fact, the robotics and that, they all kind of sort of started around the same time, and the popularization of these technologies in sci-fi were sort of helping us get used to what the technology was being developed at the time would soon to be introduced to society, and that is part of the programming of accepting these things. Oh, look, it's so futuristic. Then 10 or so years later, oh my God, we didn't think we'd get this to the 23rd century, and here it is right now in the palm of my hand. But by the 50s, engineers were developing machines to handle difficult, dangerous, and repetitive tasks, both for defense and for consumer manufacturing. Particularly the booming automotive industry. Now, again, back then in the 50s, guys, they were building robotics for defense purposes. And again, military is a form of defense, right? They're not supposed to be aggressors, they're supposed to be defenders, but they are used as the former more than the latter. But particularly the booming automotive industry, cars were becoming fast in being bought up faster than they could be made, so they needed some machinery to help keep up with that workload, and robotics did sort of help provide, the early robotics did help to provide support to the automotive industry, and it was one of the first industries to bring robotics into the workforce. And because robots were meant to replicate the patterns of movement that the human would make while lifting, pulling, pressing, or pushing, designs were based upon the I'm having difficult too many T's in that form, anatomical structure and movement. I got there in the end, or at least I think I do. But the movement of a human arm is what they were trying to replicate, and these were modified versions of the first patents for robotic arms filed over a decade earlier. For example, patents for both the position controlling apparatus was filed in 1938 by William V. Pollard, and a spray painting apparatus by Harold A. Rosalind was filed in 1939. Both of these were modeled on the human shoulder and wrist configuration and the dexterity of the hands. Rosalind's design patent was granted to the Vibulus Company, which would later become a major supplier of robotic arms in the United States. These early prototypes were not mass produced. However, once electronic controllers came into use after the Second World War, similar but more effective designs were developed, including the first computer-controlled Revolute arms from Case Western Reserve and General Mills in 1950. And a complex hydraulically powered robotic arm by the British inventor Cyril W. Kenwood, who filed his patent in 1954 and was published in 1957. So, patents have been around for robotics for at least, 75, almost 80 years. And in the case, a little bit longer of one or two of those. But PlanetBot was one of the first commercial service robots in production, and was hydraulically powered robotic arm first used by a division of General Motors in the production of radiators during the 1950s. So the 1950s was the first time that robotics was used in the workforce alongside humans, not long after World War II. But eventually approximately 8 PlanetBot were sold, and the company claimed its robot could easily perform 25 individual movements and could be reset to perform a different set of operations in a matter of minutes. However, this early model proved unsuccessful because it was controlled by a cumbersome mechanical computer, and it behaved erratically when the hydraulic fluid was cool. By the 1980s, however, the Planet Corporation had developed a more sophisticated and efficient hydraulic arm, which has been successfully used for forging operations. The ultimate design by George DeVol and patented by DeVol and Joe Engelberg was originally used to automate the production of television picture tubes. The movement was Inamit's 400-pound arm, and it was controlled by a commands stored on a magnetic drum. In '62, it was integrated into the General Motors Corporation production to sequence and stack hot die-cast metal components. After the bugs were worked out of its design, Unimate became a popular feature in assembly lines. Of approximately 8,500 machines originally sold, more than half of them were used in the automotive manufacturing plants. Today, there are approximately 8 models of Unimate available, boasting payloads from 50 to 500 pounds, and they have been adapted to such applications as material handling, spot welding, die cast and machine tool loading, with an advertised 98% reliability rate. Some of the most significant early contributions to robotics were sponsored by agencies outside of consumer manufacturing. The Case Western Reserve arm, developed by Norman Diedrich, was supported by the Space Nuclear Propulsion Office, and a similar design, the Programmable Universal Manipulator for Assembly, in brackets its acronym PUMA, was developed in the 60s by Victor Schneemann. Who was a graduate student at good old Stanford University, and we all know about Stanford and their connections to Tavistock. And it was intended for microsurgery of all things. Puma was eventually licensed and improved by the Unimation Corporation in '78. So listen to that, guys. In the 60s, they were developing robots that was intended to carry out microsurgery. Think about that. Before some of us were born, they had robots that they were working on that could carry out surgery on humans. As I said, guys, we were led to believe this stuff was in the future, but it was always around. We've never lived without robotics. And it does bear thinking about. But taking advantage of the advances in other technologies, developers gradually integrated more sophisticated computer controls and precision components into their models, and gave them a higher degree of freedom. As a result, how far a component would move away from the home position led to greater versatility. The addition of finger joints in some models created a manual dexterity for grasping, holding, and positioning objects. And in 1960s, General Electric research team headed by Ralph Mosher developed Handyman and Manmate, 2 remotely operated robotic arms. Handyman was a 2-armed hydraulic tele-operated robot and had hinge-typed jointed fingers that could grasp objects via a single command from the human operator wearing the Handyman apparatus. The other robotic arms were actually based on the human spine. In the operator wearing the Handyman apparatus, think Ripley and Aliens. 1960s Aliens, we led to believe that shit was in the future. It existed in the 60s in real life, but they were actually based on the human spine, which was the other set of robotic arms, and the moldable joints in these serpentine arms allowed for flexibility and required in product inspection operations. A different kind of a robotic arm configuration was used in NASA's Viking mission to Mars during 75 and 76. Bear in mind, guys, we're led to believe that there's currently a fucking robotic, artificially intelligent drone on the surface of our Mars right now as we speak, roving around, picking up images and stuff. But back in 1975, 1976, supposedly never a straight answer, we're sending missions to Mars along with a robotic arm in the years before Star Wars even more went on to popularize droids. But the Viking landers, designed by the Martian Marietta Corporation, had to be designed with the extreme environmental conditions of Mars in mind, just as the robots in Lost in Space and Forbidden Planet were also designed to do. They were built to withstand all sorts of environmental conditions and atmospheric pressures and such forth. Again, from the realms of fiction, it was not long after or during those screenings of those popular shows of the time, and still are as popular as maybe not they were, but still held in high regard and fondness. We were led to believe that that kind of stuff was in the future, when in actual fact it was in existence, in reality, within the realms of industry. It just wasn't that very widespread and commonly known. But back to these Mars robots in the 70s, the Viking arms were made of two light ribbon-like extenders rolled into a drum. The two halves unfurled and connected, creating a tube to scoop samples from the planet's surface. And although the arm control mechanism had some bugs in operations on Earth, they were able to guide the robot through a repair procedure, making researchers optimistic about aerospace telerobotics and human control of robots from a remote location. So that's what I'm saying. It had some bugs up on Mars, and allegedly operators here on Earth could remotely control. Of course they did. Anyway, guys, not a lie if you believe it. George Costanza. The desire to have machines that could follow commands or operate by themselves through many complex operations required special programming and the controls for the machines. Some researchers came to believe that the best way to control what machines did for people was to find some artificial means to simulate the way that humans thought, remembered, and responded to their environments. Thus, the study of what would come to be known as artificial intelligence grew up alongside robotics engineering, and the term cybernetics, the study of relationship between human and machine intelligence, was coined by scientist Norbert Wiener in 1894 to 1964 was he was alive. I'm sorry, but he coined that phrase, and artificial intelligence and cybernetics, in the 1940s. 1940s, let that sink in, guys. But while he had a colleague, Dr. Arturo Rosenbluth, they were both working on ways to improve the automatic controllers in military aircraft. Again, in the 1940s, military aircraft had robotics. And since that time, research have been experimenting with computer simulations of human thought. Let that sink in. We've been doing this for over 70 years. Although researchers disagreed about how human brain works, the AI projects that arose from their debate have become a significant factor in the development of robots. 1940s folks, talking about cybernetics and artificial intelligence and developing the technology for that. way before we had cellular phones that are in fact artificial intelligent robots. But another trend in robotics was to create mobile robots that could operate independently of humans. And in order to do this, the robot must be made able to avoid stationary and moving objects in its path. Shaky, a primitive version of a mobile service robot, was based on this idea, and he was built once again at good old Stanford Research Center in 1968. It had a vision sensor, a motorized camera, and a rangefinder, and positioned above a central processing unit, which was his computer, was on a cart. Shaky was propelled by 2 motorized wheels and 2 obstacle sensing bumpers, similar to Rosie in the Jetsons. But it could apply logic-based methods of problem solving that allowed it to recognize the shape of objects, push them, and negotiate a ramp. Like Shaky, the service robot of the 1980s were essentially brains in a box that ran along pre-mapped pathways laid out on the floor. A little bit like we have to do nowadays in the grocery store, is follow along pre-mapped pathway on the floor of these stores in order to avoid getting COVID, because it only travels in one direction. If you go the wrong way up the Tampax aisle, you need to get yourself some panty liners and maxi pads because you're on the blob. But you go the wrong way, then you're going to get COVID. But if you went the right way, then the COVID would miss you. But nonetheless, I did get out of digressive a little bit there. But the comparison that, these robots were programmed to follow lines and arrows on the floor, that is what we're doing, guys, just to sort of elaborate further on the fact that we are being programmed in robotic natures. Even though we still believe we are sentient humans, we have been programmed more than we ever could comprehend. But more recent models like the Robo Kent, Sweepervacs, and recycling scrubbers, Sweepervacs like the Roomba, from the Service Robots company, learn the area to be cleared by themselves, and they can operate independently. They don't need the lines to follow without reference targets. And that's what I'm saying. The robots will be able to roam free and go wherever they want, but the humans will have to stick to segregated areas and follow the lines in the future. Certainly that is one possible and plausible direction that we could be heading when it comes to robots. Robots will be eventually more free than us. Unfortunately, we can't tell robots in the computer, the community standards and the fact checkers that are in fact artificially intelligent robot algorithms. We can't tell them that we disagree with them and block their services, but they can block us. Already robots are sort of having an impact effect on how we act, behave, what we can think and what we can say and what we can share and agree with. But these could avoid reference targets, and they have built-in obstacle detection and avoidance protocols. Robots have cleaned more than offices. They have been used for larger environmental hazard jobs, such as the cleanup at Chernobyl power plant in the Soviet Union following a major radioactive explosion there in 1986. They pretty much didn't tell, we heard about the Chernobyl explosion, but no one told us on the news that they were using robots to clear up the mess. Can you remember hearing about that? But nonetheless, they did send robots in there. But Shaky's ability to learn from interaction of its sensors with the environment also became the basis for the small insect-like robots developed by researchers such as Rodney Brooks at MIT, again part of the Tavistokian network of manipulation, and this was beginning in the 1980s. In the 1980s, we had the popularized robot cartoon Transformers, where they had Insecticon transforming robots. And also, we looked recently at DARPA's research and involvement with insect drones and insect allies, where they're building genetically modified insects. But Brooks believed that the interaction of machine sensors with their environment creates a learning situation for robots similar to that of a human infant. And according to its theory, it's not necessary to build complex computers with thousands of stored facts to control the robot. Instead, the simple motor and sensor elements are combined to create robots that learn from experience. Brooks built robots modeled on the multi-legged insects such as Genghis, designed to negotiate the kind of rough terrain that would be encountered on other planets. NASA, never a straight answer, planned to utilize Hermes, a smaller version of the Genghis, to explore the surface of Mars. Yada yada, whoop-de-woo, ray-a-ta-tay. But many researchers argue that a humanoid robot is best for adapting to the human environment. And when Rodney Brooks and Andrea Stein, the co-founder of COG Humanoid Robot Project, again MIT, part of the Tavistokian network of manipulation, their goal of producing an android that could behave like a human being and interact with human beings was considered controversial. However, soon after, other similar projects were in development at the Vanderbilt University School of Engineering. Guess who they're a part of? If you guessed Tavistock, you guessed correctly. But it has been working, and they have been working on a humanoid robot called Isaac. Isaac, like COG, is learning to interact with human people in a neutral way, just like the robots in Lost in Space and Forbidden Planet. But the projected use for Isaac is to perform as an in-home caregiver. Rosie in the Jetsons, and again the robot in Lost in Space gave care, as did Robbie to his master. But other university-based robotics researchers in the United States include projects at the University of Southern California, the Californian University of Berkeley, and also Georgia Tech, and they are all destined for use in medical, private, and military security capacities. Notice they didn't say social purposes there, or also in environmental hazard situations. Are we about to have an environmental hazard situation in the form of an asteroid or maybe a Chinese rocket that descends to Earth and falls conveniently on a firework factory or some nuclear research plant? Wouldn't that just be coincidental if it happened? But the US and European robotics research is taking issues such as mobility, robot-human interaction, and vision systems, speech imitation and recognition, and cognition all into account. These topics are nothing new to Japanese robot designers, however, and in Japan, which has almost twice as many robots as the United States, is developing android-type robots for wide ranges of uses, to work outside of space stations and spacecraft, to interact with its growing geriatric population in hospitals and at home, and to act as civil servants in urban centers. Robocops, folks, because cops are in fact civil servants. That's what they are being purposed for. And in 1986, the Honda Motor Company had completed P1, meant to coexist and cooperate with human beings. Honda expected that by the time their humanoid robot was perfected, such robots would be used in everyday life to serve humans, not just in special operations, but in everyday life. In the fall of 1997, however, Honda completed P3, which looks like a suited astronaut. We saw a little bit of P3, I believe, in the Terminator decoded streams, but it has a backpack with a 136-volt battery, a wireless receiver, and a processing unit. Commands are transmitted by the wire. It also looks a little bit like Tweaky from Buck Rogers, who earlier today Maiden and myself were talking about, but we are going to save talking about Tweaky from Buck Rogers until we get to the 70s. Where we will be picking up in probably part 2 of Robots Rising. But the 136 battery wireless receiver and process units were carried around by the P3, and commands are transmitted by the wireless Ethernet modem. And according to Honda, the P3's vision sensing system is able to identify stairs and other objects in a room, and you can walk up those stairs and restabilize itself when pushed off balance. At Waseda University in Japan, researchers have been working with another Android project called Hadalei. Like MIT's COG, Hadalei still looks much like a Lego project with cameras for eyes, but researchers in other labs are working hard at simulating a human brain to someday operate from inside of androids like Hadalei. So they're working on building a simulated human brain to put inside of these robots, which will essentially turn them into pretty much C-3PO. But meanwhile, Fumio Hara and a team of research at the Science University in Tokyo have been working on an industrial face robot that can identify dozens of human expressions and make facial gestures itself. Recently, the face robot has been fitted with a simulated skin, hair, and eyes, and its designers believe that worker interaction with a humanoid face that provides an emotional as well as a verbal response will help reduce industrial accidents. As with technology in general, corporate and industrial developers and in independent inventors alike have enthusiastically adapted robotics into the entertainment and public relation industries. Corporations like Sony are beginning to market robotic pets. Tamagotchi, remember those? They were essentially robotic pets, but LCD pixelated pets, not little robot dogs or cats and such forth. But they want to build them that look and behave like cats and dogs for people with allergies or for those who don't have the time to take care of a real pet. What will happen to real pets when robotic pets take their place? But since the 1980s, novelty robots have appeared at trade shows, conference openings, and in safety programs at grammar schools. Robotic technology has been integrated into every facet of our lives, from manufacturing to military strategies, medicine, and other public and private service industries, including environmental cleanup, space and underwater exploration, as well as entertainment. The integration of artificial intelligence and robotics during the last quarter of the 20th century has resulted in predictions that androids, autonomous humanoid robots, will be part of our every lives before the end of the 20th century. There is further reading. As I said, it was a little bit of a long-winded article, but when you realize, guys, that robotics has always been here, it's not coming. It already rose. It's not rising. It already rose, people. It's been around for decades, and it's had an impact on all of our lives in ways that we probably never even imagined. So if or not, we've got time for one little last article and look at a robot from retrospective fiction, or not, remains to be seen. We probably will, and then we will start thinking about wrapping up Robots Rising Part 1 Retro Robots, and head back to the studio for some live reaction, interaction, chat in Commodore-ship. Not how you say it, T. You know what I mean, but we'll have a little bit of a chin wagging and chill out and talk about some robots after the fact, once this presentation is done, which is pretty much about to be so. As I said, we're going to take a quick last look at one important robot from fictional history before we do conclude this stream this evening. So stay tuned. We're almost done, guys.
We interrupt this program to give you a bulletin just received from one of our naval units at sea. A large object traveling at supersonic speed is headed over the North Atlantic toward the east coast of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Drew Pearson. We bring you this special radio television broadcast in order to give you the very latest information on an amazing phenomenon: the arrival of a spaceship in Washington. The Army has taken every precaution to meet any emergency which may develop. Just a minute, ladies and gentlemen, I think something is happening. To give you these facts. But if you threaten to extend your violence, this earth of yours will be reduced to a burned out cinder.
He's a robot. Without you, what could he do?
There's no limit to what he could do. He could destroy the earth. All vehicles close in. Let's go.
Before there was Robbie the robot in Forbidden Planet, and before there was the robot in Lost in Space, there was Gort, who we just saw briefly in action from the 1951 classic sci-fi movie, and one of the all-time great cinematic masterpieces, The Day the Earth Stood Still. It was, oh sorry about that, also rebooted in 2008 to send the message similar to that of the 1951 predecessor and original that was based off of a book from the 1940s, but it was another example of popularized robots from the 1950s, maybe not as loved but still widely recognized as one of the all-time greats in the sort of fandom and geek communities that like comic books and sci-fi movies and such forth. He is one of the all-time classic robots. But he predates both Robbie and the robot from Lost in Space, and is sort of one of the first, if not the first, robots introduced in the 1950s, whereas it had been a few years since we first saw Maria. We started out with a little bit in retro robots this evening, started out in Metropolis, but it wasn't until the 50s and the 60s in particular that robots started to become far more used and popularized in fiction, as well as we have just saw starting to be introduced and playing their part in industry and interacting with humans, although they did not interact in the ways that Gort did. But he was an 8-foot tall humanoid robot that appears in 1951's The Day the Earth Stood Still. And he was a seamless silver android robot that was formed from a single piece of flexible metal that would then go on, obviously, to inspire the Terminator 2 movie, in which we saw exactly that, but with the special effects to make it so much more essentially visual than it was back in the 50s. But he was a single piece of flexible metal, and he accompanies the alien ambassador Klaatu. There was actually a character named Klaatu in Star Wars. I may even think they were a species, but he was was an alien ambassador, and he came to Earth on a flying saucer. And this kind of movie brought aliens, flying saucers, and robots all into the equation, and sort of, you know, the mix that would fuel recipes for further pieces of fiction. But it brought all of those aspects into the one movie, which at the time was kind of pretty, you know, out there, in sort of a very, very brand new concept. Wait, there's a fucking flying saucer, there's an alien, he's got a fucking robot, damn you. And as I said, this was before Forbidden Planet and both before Lost in Space, but it was the first sort of real flying saucer and robotic movie. But as I said, little known is known about Gort. He didn't really have all the statistics in sort of data research that we had with Robbie and the robot B9 from Lost in Space, where they sort of give us a list of the things that they could do. Gort's sort of capabilities were pretty much unknown, which was also sort of highlighted in the movie, but it was led to believe, yeah, he could pretty much destroy the planet if he wanted to. Probably better be a little bit cooperative to what he's got to say, hear him out, and maybe he's got a point. But they come to Earth to warn Earth that, you know, the Earth was hellbound and on a pathway to self-destruction, and humans needed to kind of sort their shit out and get rid of their nuclear armaments, or else if you don't blow each other up, we will for you, kind of thing. And I believe when they rebooted it, it wasn't so much the nuclear threat message, it was more the environmental message that was rebranded in the reboot as the message brought from the alien and the robot Gort. But they pretty much essentially kept Gort in the reboot the exact same as he looked back in 1951, but they just sort of CGI'd and pimped him up a little bit. But as I said, there wasn't much really known about him other than he was made of one piece of flexible metal, which explains the lack of seams. And as I said, he was the predecessor to the Terminator, which would see the liquid robots. It could form any variety of shape, size, humans, animals, you name it. They can make themselves look like it. Those things walking among us right now, do we even know if a human would be a liquid robot just like in the Terminator? Bear in mind, some of the technology that is made available and announced to us publicly has been around for decades, if not centuries, previously in secret research facilities deep underground, or maybe hidden in plain sight in large skyscrapers in metropolistic cities, as we saw a little bit in the movie Metropolis. But as I said, he was one piece of metal, he was sort of liquid, and Klaatu, his alien companion, describes Gort as part of an interstellar police force that is tasked with maintaining peace in space, and he has accompanied Klaatu to protect him from harm. However, the Earthlings aren't exactly very welcoming and are a little bit hostile towards Gort, and then Gort does go on a little bit of a rampage before they do manage to sort of calm him down and subdue him and leave Earth without leaving a little bit of path of destruction behind them. But Gort stands at 8 feet tall, and he towers over his buddy Klaatu and most humans. He does not speak, but he will respond to whatever orders Klaatu gives him. Klaatu warns that Gort is so powerful he could easily destroy the Earth, and he possesses limitless potential. While the full range of Gort's abilities remain unknown, he has shown to be impervious to human weaponry, so you can't shoot him with bullets, bombs, lasers, or any of that. And he himself does have a laser beam weapon that he shoots from his visor. He also uses his weapon to instantly vaporize any human weapons or devices presented at him in a threatening manner. When Klaatu is shot by an American soldier, Gort instantly responds by disintegrating the soldier's gun. Little bit of trivia for you here about Gort, and in particular the day the Earth stood still. But in the 1940s short story Farewell to the Master, which was what inspired the day the Earth stood still, Gort is named Gnut. or Newt Nut. I don't know how on earth you would pronounce that, so it's a little bit more aesthetically sounding for the mouth to deliver than that original conceptual name for him. But he is suspected to be Klaatu's master instead of his servant, and Klaatu was a humanoid-looking alien. Gort was played by a 7'7" actor named Locke Martin, and it was a thick foam rubber suit that was designed and built by Addison Herr. The two suits were created and fastened alternatively from front or back so that the robot could appear seamless depending on the camera angle. But as I said, there's not really much else we can tell you about Gort other than he was a very popular robot from the 50s and sort of the dawn of the popularization and the normalization of robotics during that period of time that was delivered via sci-fi movies and TV shows. But the realistic side of things were that while we were watching those screens, although we weren't, because some of us weren't alive in the 50s, we actually had to watch these movies in reruns. But in the 1950s, when people did go to the drive-in or the movie theater and watch these movies on a Saturday night, they thought these were the things in the realms of distant future, not their present and contemporary times. And as you know, we are in the 21st century. Do we really want to sort of comprehend just how advanced robotics is and just how much control and impact they have over our everyday lives? Ignorance is bliss. But with that final little look at a retro robot from the 50s and 60s, we will wrap this up and return to the studio. So hold on to your britches. Don't be running for the door just yet, as you do tend to do. And that's partly my fault for sort of saying goodbye, farewell, auf Wiedersehen at the end of the presentation, when that is not always the end of the show. So guys, hang around if you want to go and take a little leak or go outside for a smoke. I am going to stick a little bit of music on for a few seconds as gives me a chance to then get myself situated and back in place to greet you live, which we will do extremely shortly. So welcome back, everyone. That actually took me a little bit by surprise and startled me that it ended so abruptly. I was in the midst of doing something and all of a sudden, shit, it's over. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed that, and I will just turn on the camera once again and we will remove the presentation. And oh my goodness, it's run the wrong way. How I am. Welcome, guys. How are you doing today? I haven't even got the camera lined up correctly, I don't think. Yes, I do. Sorry, it's been such a while. I am a little bit of a kerfuffle, to be quite honest, with doing live streams. It's been quite a while, nearly 3 weeks since we first attempted to show you this stream that you just enjoyed, the feature presentation Retro Robots. And Devil Speak, you mentioned a little bit earlier ago, is it part 1? Yes, it is part 1. And when I sort of kind of put the concept or the idea to do a robot sort of stream, it was a little bit sort of gratuitous from my perspective, and sort of get a little bit nostalgic and geeky for some of my sort of favorite movies and series in robots of fiction from growing up, and share that with you and put it into comparison with our reality. But sort of it started out with Terminator, which became a stream in itself, and when I come to sort of follow up from the Terminator Decoded with Robots Rising, it's like, dang, what robots do you include? Where do you start? Where don't you start? So I figured, you know what, let's go back to the beginning and kind of progress sort of from where it started to where we are, and look how sort of robots have inspired us, influenced, and been part of our lives ever since the moment we come into this world. And my God, Honks, you are an inner geek. For real, for real. Sometimes you make some comments that only true geeks would understand. And those movies, you know, the sort of 50s and 60s sci-fi classics, were stuff that I was kind of schooled on, because, you know, back in the UK we didn't sort of have the luxury of cable TV, and sort of movies in theatres were sort of sparse. We only had one in my hometown with 3 screens, so you weren't always, you know, offered the choice in most of the sort of movies that did get rerun on sort of terrestrial TV. The BBC were the older classic black and whites, and on Friday nights in particular on BBC Two, they used to sort of have Sci-Fi Night, and they used to have a couple of old school series from back in the day, and usually put a double bill of the old 50s classics and stuff like The Day the Earth Stood Still, Forbidden Planet. These are sort of some of my more popular movies. I actually have a whole bunch of DVDs out there from back in the 1950s that were all about that sort of era, and sort of the similar concept, robots, flying saucers and stuff. And it was sort of 50s that really did start to popularize robots within fiction, although it was some years before we saw the Force Maria in Metropolis. But you mentioned This Island Earth, which is another movie I was actually kind of looking at recently. I didn't actually watch the movie, I was looking it up. I haven't seen that for fucking probably 35 or more years. But again, one of those classic movies of the era. Another really, really cool movie a little bit later from the 70s was it Silent Run-Ins, I believe it's called. It had the 3 robots, Huey, Dewey and Louie. That's another one that we're gonna sort of cover in hopefully in these Robot Rising series. And it's sort of a little bit different, I guess, from sort of the doom and gloom, depressing deep state sort of conspiracies, although there is going to be inevitably some deep state involvement with robotics as we do progress. And as I was sort of mentioned in the presentation, that when sort of stuff like Lost in Space and Forbidden Planet were being aired in movie theaters and drive-ins and on sort of TV back in the day, it seemed so very futuristic, but robotics actually had already existed for a couple of decades within the industrial world. And how many people at the time growing up, like I said, Devil, you said when you were a kid you used to watch every episode sort of 3 times. And even though they were kind of vintage series to us in the 70s, watching stuff in the 50s was still very sort of old school and almost antique to us at the time. A lot of the stuff seems still very, very futuristic and very, very modern. But as I said, robotics has been around for a lot longer than it is. It's not a modern concept. It's not just starting to be introduced to society. It was always there. We've never really known a time without robots. And now, I think it was Mrs. Owl, she said she was at an airport and saw a robot barista. Now, yeah, hey, that's cool. It's a novelty. It might be something that'd be fun to do at Disneyland maybe, or, you know, the Epcot Center, somewhere like that, as a novelty event. Get your coffee made by a robot. But these robots are going to come into society and going to be making coffees in Starbucks and Tim Hortons and all other sort of places like that. And they'll probably be flipping your burgers at McDonald's, frying your chicken at KFC, and maybe flipping pizza at Domino's. Before we know it, in part and parcel of this kind of whole scam pandemic that we're living under, is the absence of essential workers. Or stay home, we've got to be safe, and sooner or later they'll have to come up with a way of replacing. You know, industry still has to function because the industrialists and the elites need their profits, right? And what better way to profit than have a workforce that you don't have to pay, that can work 24/7 without breaks, no benefits, no pensions, no paid vacation. None of that shit is required with robotics. And now that we're seeing more and more people out of the workforce, there is more and more of an excuse for industrialized dictators to bring robotics into the play. And, you know, it's only going to be a matter of time probably before, you know, the Amazon and UPS types are replaced with drones, and sooner or later your pizza in DoorDash and Skip the Dishes and Uber Eats will be delivered by drones, or maybe even a robot, a robotic self-driving car. You have to just open the door and stick your card in the side, and maybe they have a camera for facial recognition purposes. Good night, Martha. Glad that you made it and you were first to watch, but first to arrive rather, but not last to leave. Well, I don't know how much longer we're going on. It is 2 hours and 30 minutes at the moment. I do like to try and bring a 3-hour stream, so let's try and wing it for the next 30 minutes. Self-checkout, yeah, they are. And somebody else mentioned that earlier, the self-checkout honks. And again, sort of the more you kind of see, the more you realize it, fuck me, that there are more robots in society than you probably really ever realized. And, you know, robots in disguise, in a lot of the Tim Hortons and McDonald's in and around Toronto, sort of, even before the pandemic, they were there. You kind of would stand up and people, oh, this is a cool thing to do. I've never done this before. I'm going to order my Big Mac online and, you know, bypass waiting in line and paying with cash sort of thing. And I mean, how long have all self-checkouts been around? You know, and they sort of have, I believe, cameras and stuff that look at you while you're doing it, and they know when you don't put things in the bag and stuff like that. But I again, trying to think when that was introduced, I can't remember it happening. It sort of seems to be one of those things that's been around for a lot longer than we probably realize. But as I said, sorry, I keep saying and I noticed sort of through that presentation the amount of times is the new there you go. And for those really old time regular offenders, you'll know what there you go was all about. And again, I'm doing it, but seriously, I did watch that that stream, and it's sort of something I recorded a few sort of weeks ago, and why I kind of sort of dived straight into the presentations, because I sort of lost a little bit of my train of thought and track of what was in that presentation. But I do think possibly that it's a better idea for me to maybe sort of dive into the presentation and do the talking part afterwards, give you something to look forward to, and maybe a little bit of incentive to stick around, because I do know there are one or two folks that do tune in occasionally that really only like to sort of watch in case I sort of give them a hello or a shout out or something like that. And then once the sort of presentation and the sort of chances of that happening are removed, they sometimes disappear. But it was a smaller audience tonight, unfortunately. We did for a while have 13 people watching. I do like to sort of set myself a personal target of double digits. It is nice to sort of get at least 10 viewers, but sometimes quality is better than quantity, and there was quite a few good comments and remarks towards the latter part of that presentation, and maybe a little bit too gratuitous on my part for the retro robots at the beginning in the top 40 countdown. But as I said, I sort of wanted to sort of put a robot stream together, and when I sort of tried to do that, it was where do I start, who do I include, what do I do? So it sort of become an ongoing series, and in sort of the last sort of few months of winter before the break, the weather broke and the sun sort of finally returned, and warmer weather arrived in Toronto. I was sort of crawling up the walls and not really wanting to sort of get out of my bed, and really kind of making an effort to force myself into these things. And I can personally, for myself, I can hear it in the tone of my voice how sort of forced a lot of that was, and hopefully, you know, a little bit of sunshine, some good company, some fires, and some fresh air and exercise will make a little bit of difference and get me back to feeling somewhere closer to normal. But for the last sort of couple of weeks since this stream that we've seen tonight was shut down at the first attempt by the algorithm, it sort of made me just want to give up, to be quite honest. It's a little bit like feeling of pissing in the wind, for a simile of description for you all. But as I was saying, it was a little bit of forced and laboured, and I did sort of try to put myself through some sort of purposeful procedure each and every day without a work. It has been nearly 15 months since I last was in employment and picked up a paycheck, and sort of giving myself something of purpose, intent through the days, or did help combat some of those more depressing, almost suicidal thoughts that were running through my head. Excuse me, I think I've got something to go and collect. Bear with me, guys. Hello? Oh, you're at the front? Okay, hold on, I'll be there in a second. 2 seconds, guys. Special delivery from a special person. I'll be right back. Hang on. It is a pizza party, Glynis. It's just arrived. Thank you. And Glynis, I have to give you all my appreciation and gratitude for sending me a delicious pizza for my supper. I'm out of breath. I had to run up and outside for a second. So thank you, sweetheart, for your kindness and generosity once again. It would be nice to invite you all over for a slice of pizza, but at the beginning of this stream, I did say feel free to send me pizza, Glynis. And Glynis, you delivered, although not personally, but you did deliver the gesture. My goodness, I am out of breath. Hold on a second. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. Honks, back to your comments. Self-checkouts have been around for 10 years, but are getting installed as minimum wages are forced up. That's right. And they did sort of increase in their popularity when they increased the minimum wage here in Canada to $15. I think Tim Hortons made a big deal about no longer paying their employees break money. Sorry, I've got hiccups. And also, look, it says it was sealed with love, and it was also sent with love. So back to you, Glynis. I wonder if a robot made this. But yeah, that was something that did seem to sort of increase after the minimum wage was increased here in Canada. You did start to see an awful lot more of these self-checkout systems, particularly in fast food outlets. Devin, what else is in the bag? Oh my god, so in the bag we got some Coca-Cola. I haven't had a Coca-Cola. Where's Baby P? I'm going to eat some pizza and drink Coke. I'm sure to be burping. And she missed a little shout out as well, because I do know she loves Lost in Space, so I did a little special montage for her. And if some of you guys have a special movie or a piece of fiction that you're interested in that we may be featuring in the future, or a robot, hit me up and maybe I'll do a little special something for you. Glynis, you're the next in line. Let me know something of one of your favorite robots and we'll feature it in one of the future robot streams. Well, I got a couple of Cokes, and also you always manage to deliver a meat stick, Glynis. You are a woman after my own heart, and you know how to please your T. That's me, T. I'm not going to say I'm your man, because that might give some of the viewers out there reasons to make voodoo dolls. And trust me, guys, I get emails from viewers. But thank you. I've got a meat stick, and I got a delicious pizza, and I got a couple of Cokes. And it's been a bit meager pickings, to be quite honest with you, diet-wise. And I think it was Devil yesterday mentioned I look as though I do need a little bit of a sandwich. Although I do actually retain a little bit of body fat throughout the winter, and do sort of eat a very fatty diet throughout the winter, because I am pretty much nothing but skin and bone and gristle, piss and shit. With the occasional dribble of sweat. But as I said, I've been sort of living mostly on sort of my pantry stuff, canned food and ramen, with the occasional top up of fresh groceries whenever I can. But even the sort of fresh groceries I sort of do pick up are not exactly necessarily of the healthy variety. Hot dogs, bologna, stuff like that. Yeah, look what you started at now, Glynis. Honks wants a pizza. If you were around, Honks, I'd certainly share a slice of pizza with you, my friend. And hopefully, as I said, we might even run into you at some point through the summer, as we do some out and about streams over on TSP TV. Hopefully some of you guys caught the first out and about of summer 2021 yesterday at TSP TV. It's the first time I've done an outside broadcast and the first time I've actually streamed on TSP TV this year. In a little bit of kind of what I was going to try and say is part of this little chat and interactive live is possibly what the plans for the summer are going to be, because obviously I sort of want to be out and about as much as I possibly can and enjoy the weather while it is here, after being locked up in sort of solitary confinement type situations throughout the winter. I want to be out as much as possible. It's like being let out of jail, right? And some of these presentations do take a little bit more time than I possibly ever thought I would put in to ship video productions, and something I actually did find that I found myself enjoying was sometimes sort of producing, editing, and creating the sort of imagery, the intros and the thumbnails and that kind of stuff a little bit more than I actually do presenting it. And I think sort of, again, not sort of feeling very good about yourself and not really wanting to be a sort of about people, it is a little bit difficult sometimes to put on a game face and pretend things are all normal, when in actual fact, you know, the sort of struggles are a lot more harder than I probably let on or want to admit to myself. So little tokens like getting a pizza, you don't know how much that means to me, because I haven't eaten anything of considerable deliciousness for a couple of months now. So I am going to tuck in and have a slice, if you don't mind, guys, because my mouth is salivating and my stomach is rumbling. And beautiful, half cheese, half pepperoni. Boring, I know, but it is something I like. A little bit like Kevin from Home Alone. He liked just a cheese pizza. So anyway, this is to you, Glynis. Chink chink. Oh my god, delicious. You know, when you haven't tasted something for such a long time, a little bit like vagina, I guess, or penis, depending on your preference, it tastes that much more amazing than it really is, although some vaginas you don't really want to be tasting. So there you go. Oh my god, I'm dribbling. Shouldn't talk with my mouth full, but I can taste the love and the deliciousness there. Hang on, can I do that? I don't know if I can change the filter midstream. No, I can't. Oh yes, I can. Just for you, Glynis. We're in colour. And actually now I do have a little bit of suntan. I don't mind being in colour so much when I'm, you know, the movie Papillon with Steve McQueen, and he's in solitary confinement. He sticks his hand out the window. How do I look? That's how I feel. I'm salivating. I'm sorry, guys, for my decadence right now. But there you go. I do feel a little bit healthier and better about myself when I've got a bit of colour to my skin. And again, dribbling, salivating. I just got pepperoni, and that's it. And I think it was, is it half cheese or is it pepperoni everywhere? I can't see. But yeah, just simple. I don't like pizzas with lots of toppings and those ones that are big and huge like that. I kind of get a little bit, I don't know, something about just the single topping and the simplicity. So I'm going to finish this slice and wash it down with a Coke. It's actually making me uncomfortable in colour, so I'm going back to black and white. That was just for you. How are you a guy? Oh, how are you a guy? Elmel, you are the token gusset. I'm doing a lot better now. Glynis sent me pizza and Coke and a token meat stick. It's a double bended over meat stick for some of you ladies that like that sort of thing. Hugs to you, Glynis. Hugs to you, Elmel. Hugs to everyone, actually. I'm absolutely happy now. I've had a delicious pizza. And just to let you know that this week, 4 days out of 5, my lunch and supper combined in the one meal was bologna sandwiches. I think you were one of the original Gussets, Elmal. But better late than never, and it's always a pleasure to see you, my muse, in the chat. But where were we? Robots. I'm gonna close that up as much as I want to dive into it, and try and wrap this up in the next 15 minutes or so. So I am gonna have a little sip of Coca-Cola too. But again, you know, it's been like 3 weeks, I think, since we last streamed here, so I do want to sort of get back into a little bit of regularity. But unfortunately, all my efforts and best intentions to try and get 3 streams in a row, 3 streams where I get 10 viewers in each stream and I get over 50 views was the sort of bar I set myself for. And it was a little bar that I wasn't able to achieve for love nor money, not through want of effort in trying. It was mostly due to algorithmic interference. Luckily enough, we did get through this presentation algorithmic interference free. That was a little bit of a mouthful. Hold on. Hold on. There it is. Baby P, that's for you, wherever you may be. But what was I saying? Yeah, trying to get the sort of rhythm and regularity of sort of streaming 3 nights a week. We were Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The Sunday stream never seemed to sort of get the numbers or the reaction that Friday and Saturday. I took it upon myself to change to Thursday, Friday and Saturday. But somehow, some way, the powers to be wouldn't allow me to get those 3 successful streams, a little bit like kind of pulling the slot machine in Vegas to get the 3 sevens to win the jackpot. Wasn't necessarily looking to win the pardon me, Coca-Cola and pizza. Wasn't necessarily trying to win the mega payout jackpot, but I was sort of hoping to get a little something back on the return for the efforts, but nonetheless, as it is summertime and hopefully we'll be out and about streaming more, it will probably reduce the amount of time. Coca-Cola, thank you, Glynis. We'll have to let Baby P know how many there are, just so that she sort of feels part and parcel of these proceedings. But as I was saying, it is the sort of summertime now. I did do the first stream out and about, and as long as I have data on my phone, which I do have for the next month now, and as long as it lasts, we will try and do streams that are outside. But the amount of time I will be spending inside hopefully will be limited, so I doubt I will have be putting the same amount of effort and time into these productions and presentations as I was doing when I literally had fuck all else to do other than that. And to be quite honest, guys, you probably don't know how much these presentations kept me sane and, dare I say, even alive. So it's, as I said, this sort of robot series was a little bit sort of self-indulgent and maybe not as enjoyable for the masses, although masses, we haven't exactly got that many folks here, but we do have a good bunch of folks that seem to enjoy not only my company but each other's company, and that is an important part of this whole procedure. So I was kind of thinking that I might, because I do enjoy making videos, I do enjoy editing and putting this stuff together. Elmal, when you were here last time, and this stream actually was shut down the first attempt, you mentioned that my sort of video editing had come an awful long way, and it was only about just over a year ago that I actually sort of realized, my god, the normal's not coming back. This is the normal now. I don't got a job, I don't got a source of income right now. I was in the sort of process of thinking before COVID hit us and shut all that shit down that on the back of 2019 rather, ending, I had a regular job. I was earning a decent amount of money. I was paying my bills. I was ahead of myself. I had a stockpile of food. I had a stockpile of weed. I had a stockpile of most things going, and I was also bringing in a little bit of side cash from my YouTube endeavors, and I thought, you know what, maybe, just maybe, I can go part-time in the kitchen, because I was beginning to hate and loathe it, and spend a little bit of more time and effort on YouTube. Unfortunately, the kitchen was taken away from me, and I had no other real alternative, although I did have alternatives, but limited options. So I thought, let's throw myself into it. And as I said, when I started out seems like many years ago, initially at the thrift store prepper that become TSP TV, I found editing a waste of time. Like, what a fucking point is this? It takes longer to make a 30-second intro than it does to actually record, you know, the content that I want to upload. So I never really bothered with it. And again, when you only have sort of maybe 1 or 2 days off a week, it is very time consuming, especially when you just want to relax and try and recharge after being on your feet for 60-70 hours a week. You don't really want to be sort of crouched over looking at a tiny screen editing for hours on end, but it was something that did become a little bit enjoyable for me. And not only the purpose of putting the presentation for the handful of folks that do tune in, the regular offenders to these shit video productions, it did certainly serve more of a purpose of keeping me somewhat closer to sane and from maybe, you know, giving up the ghost altogether. But hopefully we're sort of out of those dark, depressing days of winter. The woods of winter are behind, the meadows of summer are opening up, and hopefully, as I said, we'll be doing a lot more out and about, unscripted, unpresentation, reality type streams with some familiar faces who I did meet up with yesterday. And we also may be having some new characters for Tea and Friends. But maybe I might just go to sort of trying to put a stream a week out here at Reality Decoded, and possibly try to just make videos to upload rather than go through the presentation and live process for a little while, and see if or not anyone pays attention to those uploads. And the first of which, in a little bit of experiment, was today. I don't know if anyone has caught it yet, but I uploaded a video called Havana Syndrome, which was one of the, I don't really sort of put videos up, and it was a pretty shorter video by my standards, at around the hour mark. But I want to sort of experiment and see a little bit just how well uploads do, because as I said, I do sort of enjoy putting together these sort of presentations. And before, back at TSP at the live feed, we just used to do live shows about nothing, press record and talk for hours about nothing. Sometimes we'd have an interesting topic, and then maybe a Canham or Danielle would be distracting and would forget all about it. And maybe catered a little bit too much in those days to what was going on in the chat. But I was also under the assumption that people actually watched the videos that I uploaded, and it was only sort of when I went to the trouble and effort of editing and putting stuff together that I sort of was looking for maybe a little bit more of a reaction. Not, oh, that's a great video, it's the best video I've ever seen. I wasn't looking for that, but was certainly looking for a little bit more of a return for effort in terms of comment and input on the subjects that I was talking about in editing these uploads for the first time together. But it did become very apparent after a while that people just don't watch uploads. They may watch the first few minutes, somebody might leave a thumbs up and a random generic comment, say great video, thanks for sharing, without actually watching the video or even going to the lengths and trouble to watching the video after leaving that comment. Yeah, you do, Devil, you always like to put a comment in, and that's why I also appreciate your input there. But again, another sort of thing with some of this information that I share, that live streams don't often get watched after the fact. I know a couple of you regular offenders do sort of like to catch up on your own, but for the most part, it is once the sort of stream over, then it very rarely will get more views, whereas a sort of upload can be sort of shared and passed around a little bit more after the fact. So that was something I sort of wanted to see if it would have any impact or difference to the return in terms of views in comments on uploads. But there you go. It does sort of seem that the best sort of solution for me was back sort of during the 2 weeks of tea at TSP TV, and a little bit prior to that I was experimenting with trying to sort of put together some featured content for the live streams, and it did sort of seem the only way that I could really get people to watch them in their entirety and sort of pay attention to them was to put it in a live show. For some reason you guys seem to, not all of you, but some guys do seem to only be interested when it's live and not really want to pay attention. It's not live, I'm not going to bother watching that. So that is a little bit of my intent at the moment, because I do have a whole host of ideas, plans in content, and it's sort of in many ways sort of piled up and become a little bit overwhelming. It's like, where do I start? What content, what presentation, where do I start? And quite a lot of the presentations I've done recently, the Terminator, the Ghostbusters, and even this, the Robot Rising, it took an awful lot of data up, not data, but sort of space on my phone. I've got an awful lot of clutter in things that I need to sort of clear out and delete. So this is sort of a little bit of an end of a chapter going into a new chapter of Reality Decoded. It gave me a chance to clutter out some of those files and stuff that recordings that I no longer lead, and can sort of start a little bit fresh. But hopefully those that did watch the Havana Syndrome upload found it interesting. If you haven't done it, maybe once this stream's finished you can go and check that out. But as I say, it's something I enjoy doing, is editing and sort of filmmaking, and sometimes I do enjoy that more than the presentation part. Certainly when I don't feel like sort of facing the world, it is hard, as I mentioned, to put the game face on. But back to Robots Rising, as I said, this was part one. I do plan and have a whole bunch of ideas for future streams. We're going to sort of try and do 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s robots. That's a stream on its own. Some of you guys are a bit 80s nostalgic nuts like myself. Yeah, I kind of could. I mean, I should try. I mean, my phone actually has an awful lot of memory on it for a cell phone. It's got over 128 gigabytes of memory, which is up to about 98 at the moment, with all the sort of stuff I've recorded and saved and stuff like that. But what was I saying now? Robots Rising. So again, we've got sort of Star Wars, we've got stuff like RoboCop. That could be a stream in itself, but I'll try to sort of maybe condense some of those sort of streams. It could be an stream in their entirety and put them in to a series of streams on robots. Yes, I have thought about podcasts. Glynis was actually looking at some sort of podcast applications the other day, how you can create them. His vids are awesome. It's because that made me realize just how many corporate shills are out there. I don't know whose vids are awesome. You're talking about mine, Almel? I hope you are. Winter sucks for a lot of people. It really does. I have my vices, a gambling stalker. Sorry, I wasn't really paying attention to your comments. Yeah, Almel, right time. Sorry, they're disappearing faster than I can read them. Why am I doing this? I can read them over here. Sorry, lost my train of thought. You know what? I'm gonna have another slice of pizza. I'm sure you don't mind. It is nearly 3 hours, so I have been sort of rambling on a little bit and am kind of like losing my train of thought, and do desperately want to delve in to this delicious, very welcomed pizza. Yeah, people love them while driving. Actually, it was what was his name, the Canadian trucker. I used to say quite a lot he'd listen to my streams while he was driving. And I do have a second editing app where I can separate audio from video, so that might be something to do. I love falling asleep listening to faking asleep. I know what you mean, Almel. To podcasts, and maybe that might be sort of the way to go. I might become a bedtime story reader for middle-aged to elderly women that may or may not be divorced or desperately unhappy with the man that they married. I get emails, folks. But yeah, I did think that, because Annie Bedell at Pepper Chick says she always finds it very difficult to stay awake during my podcast in the nicest possible way, although they might just be that boring. And this could indeed be a cure for insomnia. And Viagra was never ever intended for erectile dysfunction. It was a blood pressure medication in its infancy, and it was the side effects that caused painful, elongated erections that was then marketed as erectile dysfunction medication. Fraudulent slip. Alright, I just realised we've gone a little bit longer than the 3 hours. We're not going to have time to bring Anime Almel, our little dancing girl, into place, so let's try and wing it a bit longer. Tell me about robots, guys. What's your favourite robot? What experience of robotics have you got that you find disturbing or scary? Interact with me. This is what I look for more than anything, the interaction and the feedback. Because a lot of this stuff I just think about in my mind. I haven't got an outlet. Part of this was, in its creation, was an ability to sort of maybe reach out to some other folks where we can talk about stuff like this. I think it was Almel in one of your emails, my darling. You said that this has sort of become a little bit of a support group for certain like-minded individuals, where maybe in our daily routine we can't sort of talk openly with our immediate peers, or maybe even our family and loved ones. But this is a little bit of a sanctuary where some of us oddballs and weirdos and misfits of society can get together and talk about this shit without ridicule. And, you know, the whole let's be excellent to each other is something I do like to sort of embody and empower within our little community here. Yeah, we did do a little bit of there was a tiny segment on Rosie from the Jetsons, and she certainly was an influence on sort of real life robots. She was an assistant robot, did the house cleaning and stuff like that, you know, Roomba. And we also sort of have these sort of robotic coffee machines and stuff nowadays. Me, Glynis, I'm an insomniac. I can lay down in my bed for hours with all the comfiest pillows and covers, my comfy PJs and furry hoodie, dimmed lights and heater, and I can just watch even beyond the point of tiredness until you sort of go around the clock till you're not tired anymore. But I do try to watch something in the winding down process to falling asleep. Devils doesn't have a favourite robot really, he just imagines the future and the melding of flesh and metal. Again, this is the Terminator theory, and again Metropolis, they transferred a living sort of personality into a robotic body. Way ahead of its time. 1927, folks. What's creeping you out, Mrs. L? Me eating pizza or robotics? Sorry about this, guys. As I said, I haven't had a delicious thing to eat in quite some time. Me and robots, low. No way. You two crazy. I'm sorry, I'm not understanding that, Glynis. Me and robots, lol. No way. You two crazy. Explain yourself there, Glynis. I'm not following. Ooh. AI is very, very creepy. I do plan to cover that a little bit, because again, transferring the memories. They had the dead child, right? And they made the robot that looked identical to the child, and then sort of put his memories, but eventually they didn't love him anymore. Jude Law was the sex robot in that. And AI was actually a retelling of Pinocchio. Steven Spielberg come out in 2000, and incidentally it was pulled and delayed from its release date, which was prior to a certain September Tuesday. And in that movie, if you can remember, when they do arrive in Manhattan, the whole city is pretty much half underwater, and the two towers were poking out of the water, all crumbled and broken up. Okay, look at the comment above. Sorry. I'm definitely a misfit. Rosie on the Jetsons. How far up do I have to go, Glynis? Wait, somehow the speaker activated itself. I just got 3 sevens in Vegas in April, and I all got was a ticket for $2. 2 were 1.5s. I'm still lost in it. Lost wages, Las Vegas. I used to like going to the horse races in the summer, won a few times. Real fun. T, I realised I've been watching you almost 3 years. Yeah, it is getting on to the 3-year mark that I sort of have been processing it, producing shit video productions. And again, you are one of the sort of original regular offenders, Almo, that come over that first wave of Marfugal Tsunami. I'm still missing the comments that I'm supposed to be seeing, Glynis. I'm back to his vids are awesome. It's because T that made me realise how corporate shills are out there. Indeed, there are a lot of corporate shills. Anyone with 100k subscribers or more is on the payroll and will be provided with a script from YouTube. Don't take that word from it. There's a burp for you, baby P. Don't take my word for it. Make of it what you will. Go down. Okay, you're just getting suggestive now, Glynis. I know you bought me pizza. That doesn't necessarily mean because you bought me dinner I'm going to be putting out and giving you oral pleasures. Play your cards right. If you'd thrown in a bag of weed as a delivery as well, then maybe you'd have got some cunnilingus. Anyway, you're too far up. Go down. I have pictures of my insides. That's a disturbing thing. I had an MRI scan and I saw pictures of my brain, and it was quite frightening, actually. I don't know how to describe it. Okay, me and robots, lol, no, too crazy. Almal's definitely a misfit. Devil doesn't have a favourite. Well, we just made pizza. Oh, is that what you're talking about? Mrs. Almate Pizza. And that is where I have a surgical small robot in you. Now, I'm not sure. Interesting. The best robot... him? I can't remember a robot being in Get Smart. Although I actually haven't seen that many episodes of Get Smart, just the odd one. Can't remember that at all. Have to look that one up for a future presentation. I'm too far. You know, Glynis, you could have just like typed far quicker and easier what I'm supposed to be looking at right now, and I think you're just having fun and making and teasing me. I'm gonna have some more pizza. Sorry, that was a slice that's sort of almost can't stop now. Let's get some more Coke. I'm gonna save the meat stick as an emergency snack that I'm gonna take with me while I'm out and about. So there will always be a piece of you with me, Glynis. Had what's his name? Heim. How would you pronounce that? Is it like hymn, like a hymn that you would sing in church? Or Heim, like the Heimlich maneuver, or the hymen that gets broken when you lose your virginity. Pretty sure it's been quite some decades since you ladies broke your hymens. Sorry for some inappropriate humour there. It is hymen. Goodness. I did promise we'd be doing a panel show at some point in the future. I haven't abandoned that idea. Sometimes trying to get everyone together for that does seem a little bit problematic at times. Then again, once we give up and get sick and tired of things, it isn't always an incentive to do such things. Hi, me. Okay. Hi, me. Good guys. Said it. Spends. Oh my god, this pizza is amazing. But good job with the phonetics. Okay, I said, oh my god. Oh, I did read that comment. Has anyone known anyone who can't fall asleep while I'm watching TV or something? Okay, I think really and truly, Glynis, we both have lost the moment there, but there you go. Max called him Jaime. Another interesting robot we will be covering was from Buck Rogers. Do you remember Tweaky? It was actually two robots. The robot, one of them he wore like a pendant, and that was the main intelligent central computer, and the other robot was just a mobile device to manage and carry him around. But that was a very, very interesting robot with a very interesting concept of carrying around the central intelligence, because these are robots and we carry them around just like in Buck Rogers. Some women even carry them between their breasts, or we carry them in our back pockets, but we're always carrying around a little robot with us, just like the robot from Buck Rogers in the 25th century, but we're doing it in the 21st century. Alright, I think I'm on track now, Glynis, although I'm more concentrated on the pizza right now. What did I... oh, there it is. I just had my Coke and then I lost it. So I'm not entirely sure when exactly we will be seeing part 2 of Robots Rising. And I did again today have a little bit of an attempt. I did start the Havana upload sort of production for that a couple of days ago, and sort of lost interest and sort of was half-hearted in it. But today we had a very, very colder than normal day here in Toronto. You'll agree, Honks, this is probably the coldest May day ever, considering June's only a couple of days away. We even had a little bit of flutters of snow. So because it was a return to winter, sorry, excuse me, burp, burp, burp. How many is that now, Glynis? Like, well, that's good. Laughter is always a good medicine. And if you are laughing, then that is a good... laughing with me and not at me, that's good. Makes me cringe. Is that recorded? What's recorded? What am I missing now, Mrs. L? My daughter totally cusses out my Google. Yeah, and again, these little devices like Siri, Google Nest, Alexa, they are all robotic devices. Is that what's making you cringe? The cursing at the Google... sorry, I've got to go back for another slice of pizza. Can't stop now. Biddy biddy biddy. Yeah, you remember Tweaky from Buck Rogers Devil, I'm sure. What about you, Honks? Can you remember Tweaky from Buck Rogers? I think I had an inflatable one that you could, at the bottom sock him, he had a sand in his base and you'd blow him up and you could punch and bop him. What else am I missing? Yeah, what was I saying? So yeah, as I said, today I did have a little bit of an attempt at doing some presentation, and did try to put an all-out apocalypse presentation together for tonight's stream. Unfortunately missed my deadline. There wasn't time to complete the recording and the editing to get it up for 9 p.m. So it's going to be a little bit cooler the weekend, although there is going to be some sunshine. Depending on how warm or not it gets will determine if or not I do complete that stream. But there is a chance if I do, we might come back again tomorrow to see that all-out apocalypse episode by Mel Blanc. Who's Mel Blanc? I was thinking of Matt LeBlanc. I was going to say Joey from Friends, really. Yeah, he had a very distinct voice. Was he also the voice of Charlie in Charlie's Angels? It's only 9 degrees here on the west coast, kind of chilly. Yeah, it didn't get much warmer than that today here, Glynis. In it, this morning it was -3. There was a robotic Buzz Bunny. I remember vaguely there was a robot Bugs Bunny. We might have to look that up. As I said, I do have intentions to do an 80s edition of Robots Rising, and maybe cartoon robots. I don't know. if that could kind of combine the two. And again, Transformers and Star Wars, those are standalone robot episodes, because Star Wars is very, very, very robotic, if you realize it. Mel Blanc, lots of cartoons, Bugs Bunny. Oh, Mel Blanc was the voice character. You will see the robots with the introduction of 6G, but there was a robotic Bugs Bunny as well. I'm pretty certain there was. I'm going to look it up. Hold on. No, there wasn't a robotic Bugs Bunny, but there was a robot in Bugs Bunny, apparently. I'm sure I can remember a robot Bugs Bunny from somewhere. No. Well, yeah, part and parcel of being a geek, I did acquire a memory for the most useful information possible. So I'm trying to sort of utilize that useful information in the best way possible. But I'm sure I can remember an episode where there was a robot Bugs Bunny. Or maybe I'm thinking of a robot road. Maybe it was a robot Roadrunner. Hold on. Dang, there are actually real. It was a robot Wile E. Coyote. That was what I was thinking of. There, you see. Can you guys see that? I learned recently that regular people in the UK hire people to clean their oven. Yes, they do. Oven cleaners are quite sort of popular, actually. It's a good little sort of side gig, I guess. The Acme Robot Kit. There you go, Devil. It was. He ordered the Acme Robot kit. And I think that was the only time that he caught a Roadrunner, was when he had a robot. Hang on, I got a message from Maiden. Alright, hold on. Sorry, I should stop eating the pizza. It's rude to eat with my mouth. But again, some of these cartoons were sort of back from the sort of 50s and 60s and just got replayed and rerun when we were kids in the 70s and the 80s. When Bug History got a shock and said, "What a woman." See, Honks, you are a real inner geek. There was a female rabbit robot in Bugs Bunny. I knew there was. And again, some of those sort of old, distant, at the back of your subliminal memory need to be sort of enticed to the surface. And again, this is a little bit what I like, sort of this interaction, people answering or finishing the sentences, so to speak. But there was a lot of sort of robotics in and around the sort of the cartoons, and again, sort of where we sort of saw that the popularity in the 50s. It wasn't really again until the 80s that robots again sort of got reintroduced and repackaged and rebranded, and we started seeing the sort of more scarier, not blocky robots from the old school sort of sci-fi to the more sort of humanoid looking robots. And Star Wars certainly did play a part in parcel in making more sort of humanized robots in fiction. As up until then, they'd either like used them very, very blocky, looking like sort of refrigerator type robots, or they just kind of made a human that was a robot. He's a robot, but he looks like a human, as was a case sort of with Westworld. And again, the gunslinger played by Yul Brynner was a little bit of the prototype for the Terminator, in again reintroducing to a different era the sort of same themes or concepts through fiction that does help us normalize it. And as I said, right now, you know, think back in the 1970s or the 1980s, if you would have been able to go and have a robotic barista or a robotic serving system at your local burger bar, that would have been, oh my God, it's just like the movies. But the movies are here, they're in our everyday society, and it's only going to get worse and bigger. You know, a lot of a larger, rather robotic influence over society. They even have like artificial intelligence smart billboards now, which have a little robotic device in them that when they see you approaching it, they kind of looks you up and down a little bit like the Terminator, and then selects targeted advertising you based on your appearance. Or maybe it runs in real time through data collection and facial recognition. Oh, there's that guy TSP. He likes ramen noodles. Let's put a ramen noodle commercial up. Sorry, how many are we up to now? Baby P, you're missing a burp fest. For sure. Lost my train of thought with a burp then. Up to 8. Sorry, I need another slice. But we're getting close to the 3-hour 30 mark. So Elmo, you were to gusset, darling, so you've got an extra 30 minutes. You always get an extra 30 minutes from me. And Glynis, keep sending me pizza, weed and alcohol, and you may get some going down time if I'm ever in your close proximity. Actually 7, but I forgot exactly what I was saying, and I had a complete brain fart, which is probably a good thing that we are wrapping this up shortly. Don't forget, there is the animated Elmo Dancing Girl Challenge for anyone out there who wants to learn the dance routine and record them doing it. I use you as the outro girl or boy. Honks, what about you? You want to get your dance on? Here, take a bite. Yeah, I'm not going to even ask what putza is. Elmo, it kind of sounds like sort of the name that you would give to the discharge from a yeast infection. Yes, doctor, I've got some very fishy putza that's been coming out of my lady parts. Oh, that's because you got yourself a yeast infection mixed up with a UTI. No anchovies. Is anybody laughing at the putza? Is that a good name for the sort of discharge that would be caused by yeast infection? I'm still trying to retrace my train of thought before that last burp. Remind me what I was saying if anyone was paying attention. But as I said, we are going to be getting ready to wrap this up shortly. I can't what? You can't dance or you can't talk about your putza. Oh my God, this is so good. Right now, this pizza does taste better than fresh vagina. Don't know why we're talking about vaginas, we're talking about robots. Maybe that's the electromagnetic frequency bombarding me with thoughts. Shut him up, he's talking about things we don't want. Make him think about vaginas. But some of you ladies out there that do get titillated by such things, there's a little bit of gratuity for you. Oh my God, that's going to be at least 4 burps in one. Pardon. Best pizza and Coke I've had ever, I think. Although I have had some good pizza in Italy. There's no better place to get pizza than Italy, to be quite honest with you. Could we get to double digits? I think so. I've eaten nearly half. Sorry, some fell out of my mouth. I've eaten half the pizza, so I can save half for leftovers a little bit later once I've finished streaming. Well, robotic vaginas, Elmo, sex robots, that could possibly be a stream in itself. As I said, I don't know how many parts of Robot Rising there will be, if not there even will be another part. But my intentions are to kind of carry out a stream on Robots Rising, just out of personal interest to me and maybe personal interest to you. But Sex Robots could be an entire standalone episode. Remember Weird Science 1985? What was the other guy's name? I know Chet was the evil brother. I've got dough in the back of my throat. I've forgotten again what I was talking. It's hard to eat and concentrate, especially when you're hungry. I couldn't get into the new Westworld, although I probably should watch it a little bit. Yul Brynner, that's right, Yul Brynner was the original robot and the architect for the Terminator. Again, Westworld also kind of provided an artificial reality where you could escape to and go and live out your fantasies with robots. Oh my goodness, that was a wonderful burp to bring in the double-digit burp count. Poor baby P, she really would have enjoyed this stream just for the burps alone. You don't know how much she loves burps. She even makes her son ignite his farts. I don't know if that or not is a child abuse, but fun times at the Pamplin house, her household. On the Putzer. Yeah, let's forget about the Putzer now. But Chet, Weird Science, there we go, that was what I was talking about. Remember back in the movie, they programmed the perfect woman on the computer? Now, I'm not entirely sure if Kelly LeBrock was a robot or a Franken woman or a creation of... they dragged her in from another dimension or something. But the concept of programming your perfect woman, like we saw in Weird Science, you can do for real. You can go online, program the perfect personality of your perfect female, transfer that into a SD card where that memory of the perfect woman can then be inserted into your robotic sex device. And guys, go and check out Contactless Society upload over on TSP TV from last year just to see how many robotic sex devices can be connected via Bluetooth to your computer, to people thousands of miles away, and in more disturbing fact, to porn stars that are in porn movies. You can sync it up with what you're seeing there. Robotic sex devices, not so much now. Devil speak, oh my god, like, yeah, she was the darling of, or one of those darling heartthrobs of the 80s. And remember in Lady in Red, there was that third of a second glimpse of bush where she went full frontal. It was a scene that I did pause on many occasion on an old VHS, but she also was married to Steven Seagal, but dear God, she went plastic surgery crazy and looks worse than a robot right now. Get some. I got some puts. Yeah, I've got worse than puts on me before. I had a terrible sex toy story with anal beads that I did once share, but backfired. Yeah, Steven Seagal and Kelly LeBrock were together. I know, Glynis, you're going to get in trouble if I don't stop. It's late on a Friday. What are you going to do? What are you going to get in trouble for, Elmal? No one ever gets into trouble at the thrift store studio. But anyway, guys, I did notice we've got about a minute left before we hit the 3 hour 30 mark. So let's get the dancing anime Elmal, as we christened her, into place as we get ready to say our goodbyes. So I'm not entirely sure when we will be streaming live again here at Reality Decoded. Sorry, I'm trying to line it up, getting a bit anal. Or at TSP TV. It does depend greatly on the weather. Hopefully, though, after the weekend, Monday and Tuesday are looking though we're going to be back up in the 20s in more appropriate weather for this time of year. But the weekend we've got a couple of cooler days, although there will be sunshine, so I might get to finish my intended All Out Apocalypse Part 2 stream that I hoped to bring you tonight, but instead you got Robots Rising Retro Robots Part 1. So until the next time, guys, thank you very much for tuning in, and an extra special thank you once again to you, Glynis, for sending me pizza and Coke. And don't be a stranger, anyone else, if you want to send me pizza and Coke through a live stream and see how many burps you will get out of me in the absence of ration reviews. Trip, if you're still watching, I happily accept some of your recently acquired MREs. But as I said, guys, thanks each and every one of you that did tune in and keep me company this evening. Hopefully you enjoyed the stream. Maybe you learned a thing or two. Most importantly, I hope you enjoyed the company, and Glynis and Elmel that were laughing away there towards the end. That is my reward in itself. I don't need thumbs up, likes, and stuff like that. I'm all about the interaction and the enjoyment for everyone. So as I said, guys, thanks for tuning in. You know the drill. Till next time, keep it thrifty, be excellent to each other, and stay out of trouble. And if you've got some rank, smelly putzer, then go and get yourself a feminine hygiene wipe and wipe that shit up right now. Till next time, guys, keep safe and stay out of trouble. As I said, take care, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.